Okay, so for those of you who have solely used Infinity and those of you that are migrating over to MA from Infinity, or any of those who are just currently using MA, you're very familiar that this is going to be your home screen. Now, a key difference here for those who are kind of use both systems is that you're going to have all of your modules laid out on this general home screen, and the majority of the settings in our system will be found underneath this section right here. So if you ever have used Infinity before, you'll be familiar with the fact that a lot of your settings are actually in the module, but in MA, they have broken it out. So that's one key thing I want to address before we actually get in here. All right. So for the first 45 minutes of today's session, we're going to actually jump into the CRM and just kind of review some of the changes, the layout, as well as some of the more advanced items for those who have already used this system. All right. So when you log into your CRM home screen, it's going to break essentially all of the different entities that you've worked with over, your history of using this particular software into four key categories that you can kind of help find a lot of your entity work that you're doing without having to run searches. These categories are going to be listed underneath your hot contacts, your new contacts, your need to contact, and then if you guys have used anything such as categories before, your categories for contact. Now, all of these are just different ways that you can identify the leads that you're working for inside of the CRM. That way it gives you a better visualization of who you're working with, what regards you're working with them, and depending on if somebody's ready to sell as a hot lead versus somebody that actually needs to be contacted under your need to contacts. Now, one of the new things for those who have been using MA that are on this call that they have updated into these bars up here is each one of these sections now actually have something to give you a shortcut when you highlight an entity record. So for example, if I wanted to quickly change a temperature lead to this lead right here, instead of me actually having to open the entity record, dive into it and actually assign that information, I can actually click down here in the bottom right-hand corner, this apply new temperature button, which will give me the ability to go ahead and adjust that. Same concept goes for your new contacts. If this is no longer a new contact and you want to get them off of this list, you'll see down here in the bottom right, you'll have this unmarked as new contacts. So if I wanted to go ahead and just select this individual, click the button here, we'd go ahead and update it and then take them straight off the list. Need to contacts, another concept you can use is it gives you two different buttons. So if I was to highlight this individual, I would have two different options here. I could either apply a new contact date, meaning that if I wanted to assign a future phone call to them, I could. Or if I know this is a customer that I've worked with in the past and I've already communicated, but I never updated it, I can just simply hit select next callback date to empty, and that will pull them off of this section. And then, of course, categories is just anybody that you've created in the system underneath your own custom list of categories that you've set up to be categorized as. Now then, for those who have solely used Infinity, another key difference here is by giving you this, essentially this selection of space versus just it being condensed over on the left-hand panel, you can actually go in here and adjust the layout of the different columns displaying your customer information. And it also gives you a lot more columns to actually be viewed versus just being able to see possibly the first and half the last name of the customer. So if I need to be able to adjust my order, I can essentially grab this column, move it over to the left. If I don't like where email is being placed, I can move it over to the right. Really, it's up to you on how you want to categorize this, but you also have the ability that if you don't want to just move stuff around, let's say home phone number is nothing you ever take, it's always going to be cell phone number or work phone. You can click on the dots right here, hover over where it says columns, and then you can actually take and turn on and off any column that you don't need to be able to see. So if you don't want to see, like I said, home phone number or anything of that sort, you can essentially just turn that checkbox off and that will get rid of it for you. When you make any adjustment like that, you'll always want to make sure down in the bottom right-hand corner that you're going to hit save layout. Otherwise, every time you leave the page and come back onto it, it's going to reset everything that you've done. One thing I also encourage you to watch out for is if you put in a sub filter, meaning that let's say you start building up your contact list and it starts to kind of get a lot of different individual customers on it. You're trying to filter down by whether it's a name or if it's a phone number or the next callback date. You can type into these fields, but what I've seen people do in the past is after you type in a filter, so I'll just give you an example here, it actually keeps it in place right here. And if I hit save layout, it'll actually save that filter into place as well. So if you don't want to make that mistake, just make sure anytime you get done running a search, you hit this clear filter icon, and that will go ahead and clear the list up for you. Now then, we have a few different things that you can do in regards to actually trying to find your entity records in the system. A lot of people like to come up here and use the basic search, but personally, I like using one or two other options. I like using the advanced search, or as crazy as this may sound, I like hitting the add new entity button over here. Simply for the reason that when I go ahead and hit add new entity, not only is it running a search, but it also gives me the option to go ahead and add that entity record into the system if the customer doesn't exist, versus running a basic search, which only allows me to go into the system and actually find what currently exists, but does not give me the option to be able to add a new entity record in the event that they don't exist. So this one's more of just a time saver we'll look at here in just a second. But just to give you a good idea on how useful the advanced search is, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up real quick. We'll take a look at that. So in the MA advanced search, you're going to have it broken down into 4 different sections. You're going to have your general information. You're going to have your personnel information, meaning that like your salesperson, your primary sales rep, when they called them, when the next callback date is planned to be had, lead type, so on and so forth. It's just trying to break down information that you may find on your lead. But you also have ways of searching for your sold customers underneath owned units. So if I was looking for any customers that owned a specific trailer maker model or RV maker model, I could put that information in here and run it off of that, and it would pull up all customers that would have this specific maker model. Or if I even wanted to take it to the next level and try and find a specific stock number, I could do that as well. Whereas unit preference is any unit that your customer is actually interested in purchasing, but they have not yet made that purchase or transaction. So if you're trying to find all of your customers looking for a specific kind of unit, you can go ahead and run this, and it would actually give you an advanced list that you can run off of to try and help do any kind of specific marketing or follow-up with those customers if you need to. Now then, I'm going to show you guys just really quickly how you could go about adding a new entity, and then we're going to actually talk about some of the more advanced tools for those who've been on the system and are familiar with it. I'm going to kind of break down some different things that you guys may not have known, as well as that are useful in MMA. After I get done with that, I'm going to flip it over into Infinity, and we're going to break it down from that perspective as well. A lot of it's pretty much the same. It's just the layout and how you're actually able to navigate through it if you need to. All right. So when you're going to add a new entity record, like I said, it's better to do this than running a basic search first, simply for the fact that when I start typing in my customer information, it's going to pull up anything that's a duplicate in the system. For those who use Infinity, this should be kind of familiar to you, because when you go to add a new entity record, it takes you to a duplicate tab when you're entering in that information, so you can see what you actually are putting into the system. It's just laid out a little bit differently in MA. So if I wanted to go as far as putting a phone number in, an email address, it would kind of filter this down further for me to be able to see if what I'm actually entering in is a new customer versus an old one. And this is what I was saying. You'll notice it'll tell me based off the information I have put right here, it has found 2 duplicates. So if I didn't want to create a whole new record for Tyler Test, because this would be him right here, I could just hit open and I could proceed forward. Otherwise, I could hit create new, and that would give me the ability to go ahead and jump forward in the process and get a new record rolling. All right. So most of y'all already know how to add entities into the system, whether it's Infinity or MA. I'm not going to go super far into that. I want to talk about some of the more advanced tools that people generally tend not to use. So event notifications is where we're going to start today. Those who are familiar with event notifications knows that this is actually a very useful tool, simply for the fact that it doesn't only allow you to be able to internally communicate with one another, but it also allows you to be able to send customers emails as well based on whatever status it is that you're changing it from. So let's break it down starting from the very beginning. I'm going to hit add. Description is simply what I'm wanting this task to do. So before I pick that, I'm actually going to go look through a few different things that I have as options available to me. So what system mode is telling me here is it wants to know what part of the system am I trying to make this event notification for. So as you'll notice, it gives you a list between essentially different CRM options, entity records, your finance options, purchase orders, parts, service, receiving, unit inventory, so on and so forth. So it's really dependent on what I'm wanting to create this for. So we'll say entity. Now, what this is going to do for me is when I pick one of those specific system modes, is it's going to give me the option of statuses that are connected to that particular module. Meaning that if I would have picked finance, it would have pulled the statuses that you would find in deal desking. If I would have picked parts or service, it would have found statuses that exist for parts and service. Since I picked the entity record, it's going to pick the statuses that are available within the CRM. Now, company, this is if I want to break it down by profit center. So essentially, let's say that you guys have multiple rooftops and you're wanting to create specific event notifications per rooftop. You could pick it up specifically on the list, or if you want to make it for all of them, you could essentially pick the 0 right here and it'll actually be for all of your different companies. Next step on this would be when I go in here to pick, I have 2 options, really 3. I can choose to make it based off of an old status to a new status. I can just simply put it to a new status if I want, or I have this other change option over here to the right, which is based off of an action. To be safe, it's usually best to go off of an old status to a new one. So what I mean would be simply, let's say that it went from being, what options do we've got here? Let's go from new lead to pending. And how I would view this is new lead to pending sale. So the moment new lead changes to pending sale, this event notification is going to trigger. I get to choose who it's sending the email from. So if this is coming from a manager, I could essentially type in their email. I can choose who to send it to. I can also use this to box right here to select if I want it to go to the email address, the salesperson's cell phone if you're set up with texting, or the cell phone number itself. Now, generally speaking, I'm going to pick the email address for the sales rep, hit confirm, or the email address for the customer. I'm going to type out my subject. And if this was a texting situation, meaning that you had the SMS texting with our system, you could click this drop down right here and pick which SMS account you're trying to select it for. After that, the good thing about being able to use event notifications is you get merge code fields, which means if you want to make a message specific without it being specific, meaning that I'm not typing in anybody's personal name or personal information, I wanted to use these merge fields, it will pull off the entity record any of the information that I currently have filled out. So if I have their first and their last name and I choose to use these merge fields right here, whatever is filled in the first and last name on that entity record, it's going to pull into these fields for me. And then I can go about customizing the rest of this text based off of whatever I'm trying to alert the customer or internally to the salesperson. After I'm done with that, all I would have to do moving forward would be hit save. And then now I would have an event notification existing in the system. Now then, in order to use this tool, you have to have, by default, in order for the internal use to be functional, emailing set up in our system as well as Mailbee. And that means it's for both Infinity and MA that you have to have both of these items set up. If both of these items are not set up, you will notice that none of these notifications will work. So it's important that if you plan on using this and you do currently have emailing as an option already, that you work with your support team to ensure and hardware team that Mailbee is set up on our side and on yours, and that anything that needs to be put in place for these notifications to work is set up prior to trying to use them. Because it can be very frustrating when you're trying to do tests and you can't actually see anything either being sent out or sent in to yourself. But this is a very nifty tool, and I do highly suggest anybody who wants to be getting, like I said, internal notifications, or if you want to start notifying your customers off status changes, you use this tool to its max capability. All right, I'm going to flip over to Infinity and show the users how it works in there. Like I said, it's going to be the same concept, but I already have the information pulled up. So let's go ahead and roll into it real quick. Also, while I'm on it, since this is going to pull up this way anyways, quick breakdown for you. You're going to notice your messaging center in Infinity is also tied to your CRM. But if you were noticing in MA, messaging center is not present in the CRM. And when we get back over to the MA side, I'll show you. But essentially, that's because they've broken it out into its own individual module instead of it sharing space with the CRM, which is why a lot of that space that you now have in MA versus Infinity is available. It's because it's not combining both of these two different modules together in the system. All right, so let's go up here to the edit button. We'll go down to where it says add modify event notifications. That's how you get to it in Infinity. All right, perfect. So the layout, a little different, but still pretty much the same. Same concept. If I want to add a new one of these, I can hit the add button right here and it'll clear out my space. Same thing. I would just apply my description. I can go into my system mode, pick which one I want to use. This time I'll use service just to kind of show you the difference in the statuses. If I want to just pick a specific company, I could. I'm just going to pick 0 just to have it for all. And then now you'll notice the descriptions that I have here are available for both parts and service. So if I wanted to mark, let's say I'm wanting to create one based off of parts that are on order that become received. Find the status, parts on order. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Parts received. I'll say it's from just a test email just to have it in here. Okay. And then who I want it to be selected to. You'll notice it changes the options here from just, your salesperson or your customer's email address to the actual advisor or the customer's email if you want to. So if I wanted to make this an update to the advisor to let them know that the parts have been received into the system, I just select that there. Double click so it shows up, but be careful not to triple click like what I just did. You can delete it out if you need to, hit OK. It'll go ahead and put your email address here. And then again, you can type in whatever subject that you need to. And the difference here between MA and Infinity is that merge code list. In order for you to pull that up, you actually have to click on the insert merge field list. And this gives you a complete list instead of a kind of sectionalized list, meaning that instead of just having 1 or 2 merge codes available to me, I actually have an entire list available to me that I can utilize, which covers anything from like customer date, customer address, dealership, salesperson, service individuals, so on and so forth. It tries to give you a full list to be able to use. So that way you can make all of these messages as specific as you need to without putting in super specific information. And again, if I want to use one, I would just simply click on it. It would apply it in here. I would type out the text body of what I'm wanting to internally update the advisor. It could be something as simple as, hey, the parts have been received. Please check out your work order number, so on and so forth. And then when you're done, all you have to do is hit save and it will add it to the list. Any questions about event notifications, either on the Infinity side or the MA side? You still have to have the emailing set up and you still have to have MailB set up. It doesn't matter which software you're using. Both of them require that. So is there any specific questions that need to be addressed before I move on? If you do, just make sure to hit the little raise your hand icon and Sean will unmute you and give you the ability to talk if you need.
They can also, they can put it in the Q&A.
Gotcha.
And we have other trainers monitoring to answer any Q&A questions.
Okay. And what Sean was just telling me is if you guys also have just questions that you don't want to directly ask, if you want to throw it in the Q&A chat, you can throw it in there. And then there are other trainers that will be able to address your questions directly if you need to. All right. So that's it for the event notifications. Pretty straightforward. We're going to go ahead and jump over to probably one of the more complex, and we're going to do it in Infinity first this time, then we'll flip it over to MA. So for those who've ever taken a look at it, it can be kind of daunting if you don't know what you're looking at. But we're going to talk about the letter writing or the letter printing tool, depending on which module that you're in. I'm going to hit up here where it says letter printing. I'm going to hit the add modify letter drop down that came up, and we're going to take a look at that. It also doesn't matter if you're in Infinity or MA. This one does take a little bit to pretty much load up, simply for the fact that it's got a lot of information that's tied to it. All right. So letter writing, what is this? So this could be used for multiple functions. Truthfully, I prefer to use it for simply email follow-up, but it does have the capability to be used as mailers as well, if that's something that you're interested in. From today's kind of topic point, I'm going to be moreover referring to it as emails today, just to kind of give you a better understanding on what a lot of people tend to use it for versus what it can be used for. All right, to start off, up here at the top left, you're going to notice that you have different sections broken down. So birthday letters versus finance versus general, parts and service, so on and so forth. It can really be catered towards sales, parts, service, however you want to look at it. When you go to create a letter, or let's say we'll look at a pre-existing one to start off with to give you a good idea. There's a lot of information that goes into it that needs to be filled in. So let's just say that I had hit the add letter down here at the bottom and we're starting this from the beginning. Up here at the top, it's going to give you an option list of what kind of letter you want to look at. So if you click the drop down, you'll notice it gives you different parameters here. So anything from general to initial company contact, to initial send out, to parts, to service, to sales, to finance, warranty work, so on and so forth, or even specific unit preferences if you need. Once you make that selection, it's going to give you an option to pick a letter name. So you can go ahead and detail out whatever you want to call it. Now, what you're seeing here is this is following a process. So this is saying that for an open prospect, by day 7, if they've been contacted, it's going to send or set out an email follow-up for that individual customer. So essentially what you could do is you could, once you get familiar with this and you kind of get used to the parameter sets and that kind of information, you could actually come in here and create your own follow-up process work. You also have the capability, and a little later we'll talk about this when I click the button, but you can also schedule it for automated follow-up, meaning that if you personally don't want to have to do every single one of these tasks as they come up, you can have it automated to send out to your customer base so you don't personally have to do that. Now, after you create your name, you'll have an option here to pick a file name, which essentially is giving you an option to be able to tie a letter to this particular mailer that you're sending. And what that does is essentially if I have a template that I'm wanting to tie to this email or letter that needs to be the text base that's being sent out, that's essentially how I'm going to come in and actually tie it to this. So that way, when I send it out, it's sending out what message I'm wanting to get across to our customer base. In addition to that, you can also put in your email subject. So if you're not trying to make this a piece of mail and you actually want to make it an email like how I have it listed over here, that's how you're going to have to apply your subject when it sends out. If you want a reply address to be set up specifically for, let's say, a general manager, owner, sales manager, if you use BDC or salesperson, so on and so forth, you can pick the different options here. In this case, we'll just say general manager's email. After print, which is just saying if you were using a letter, if you wanted this to do an additional action after it prints out, you do have that capability. QC address, if you want someone to be tied in on the QC line, so that way they're being included, you can go ahead and put that on there. It'll give you an option to pick from your actual active employees or just a default role. So whoever like the default salesperson is, instead of making it specific to one salesperson, you can just pick default and it'll pull them across. So on and so forth for the service advisor too. Or if you want to make it specific, like if this needed to go to Bob Smith, then we could pick Bob Smith here. Over here to the right, same concept as event notifications. This is moreover just giving you the option to be able to pick which company you want this to go to. And in this case, this one isn't shared across the board. This one is company specific. So if I want to pick a company here, I have to pick a number. Otherwise, if I leave it blank, it will go through everybody. But the moment you pick a number, you don't have the option to backstep it, meaning that like if I say company 1, I hit save, I can't just go in there and hit 0. 0 is not an option on the list. It won't let you select that. So just make sure when you're making these, if you're trying to be specific, just be very careful when you're creating it. I would hate for you to have to go back in here and, create a whole nother one just to correct a small minor, issue such as that. Send method, again, this is just choosing if I wanted to mail this to a customer versus sending an email. If I wanted to do fastest, that's essentially just picking whichever one's going to populate quicker, which would probably be the email. Or if I wanted to hit both, I could click all, and that would send it both via mail and email if I needed it to. After that, this is just saying allow reprint after set amount of days. That's if you're using the letter aspect of it. So essentially you would just pick the days and then pick an end date that you want this to end on. And if you wanted this to actually be on a scheduled print, you have to check that checkbox in order for that to even occur. Now then, this section is where a lot of people tend to get lost. So let me explain what it's doing here. As I read from the left here, this is having me pick a field that I want to be able to generate this particular follow-up to trigger and occur. In order for that to happen, this customer has to have an email address that contains an @ sign, meaning that it's a valid email address. And it also has to have an original contact date that falls between after being contacted day 4 and day 5, meaning that once day 4 and 5 hit, this is going to then trigger to the next step. In order for that to happen, the prospect status has to be selected as in list, and it has to either have a day value of 1, 2, 5, or 6. So essentially, all of these parameters have to be occurring at the same time in order for this email to be sent out. Now, does it have to be complex like that where it has 3 things that it's dependent on? No. You could essentially, instead of picking and right here, use the or option saying that essentially if the original contact date is set between days of 4 and 5, or the prospect status is selected in list for 1, 2, 5, or 6, I can have one of those 2 options trigger it. They both don't have to be there. It could be one or the other in that event. So that's the difference between using the filter of and or over there on the right-hand side, is it's just essentially giving me the option to say it could do both or it could be one or the other, if that makes any sense. All right. After you fill out your top part up here, you do have the option down here to edit the letter that's tied to the particular letter that you're looking at. You can create a new one, like I said. You can delete the letter. You can copy everything that's up here, so that way you don't have to rebuild it out. You can print a preview of the letter. That way you can see exactly how the template body that you've tied to this particular letter-email that you want to send out looks like before even getting it scheduled. You can reprint them if this has already been processed through at a specific date range. And you can hit the schedule button here, which when you click on will allow me to come in here and determine if I want this to be a one-time thing or if I want to reoccur this, meaning that let's say this needs to be sent out on a weekly basis. I could essentially pick weekly every however many days, range of reoccurrence, meaning that if I want to set this up for a year, if I want to set this up for 5 years, or if I want to have an undefined date, I can keep it reoccurring as long as I need to in the system. Once I fill in those parameters, all I would have to do to proceed forward on this would be hit OK, and it would stick it into the system for me the way I need it to. And then if you'll notice, this also is tied in with the event notifications. So if there's something specifically that kind of runs with event notifications and I need to be able to see those particular items and use them, I could actually tie that in here as well. It's just like a little shortcut to it if I need to actually get to it. After I'm done with that, all I would have to do is hit save, and then anything that I put in here for this particular template or letter writing tool will essentially be saved and available on my list over here. Now, if I didn't check the active button up here, it will be in the inactive section. If it is active, you will be able to click on it and see that it's ready to be scheduled out and sent. Any questions about the Infinity side of the letter writing tool? And see, I do have a few questions in the chat. Let's take a look. Oh, no. Okay, never mind. We're good. All right. So now I'm going to take the time to flip this over onto the MA side for those who specifically use MA and just give you kind of the same preview broken down. So in MA, instead of it going to be up here at the top underneath some sort of link, you're actually going to have it over here in this section under your quick links. You'll just simply click on letter writing. Again, it doesn't matter which system you're in, if it's Infinity or MA. Both of them do take a minute to pull this up because it is pulling up a lot of data all at one time. Now, the first thing you're going to notice here, the layout here is actually a lot more condensed, but also in a neater fashion to where it's not kind of mixed all over the board with all the buttons at the bottom stacked out. You're going to actually have, again, all of your letters over here to the left. If I need a little more space to read the names of it, I can. If I need to be able to expand this out and pull it over too, I also have that option. If I'm trying to filter it down by a letter type, MA does give me that as a choice. So that way, if I don't want to have to scroll through and find it, I can just type in the name of whatever particular template that I'm wanting to look at. And in this case, I'm just going to pick negotiating deposit day one, and we'll wait for that to load. We'll take a preview on how all that information looks. All right, so same layout. You'll have your letter name up here at the top. Same concept with letter type, meaning that if I wanted to pick a different type, whether it's finance, parts and service, same idea. We got our subject here. If I wanted to pick the reply address, instead of it being more towards the bottom, it'll be up here at the top. If I always want to use this specified reply address, I would just check this box here, and whatever I have selected, it will always use that no matter what. If I wanted to do anything after printing, same option drop down. QC address, this one's a manual type in, so you won't have a list you can select from. You'll have to actually manually type in the QC address. Company number, this one actually does give you the option to pick 0 through 5. So essentially, if I wanted to make it for all companies, I could in MA, whereas in Infinity, the way you would have to do that is just leave it blank. In MA, it's totally okay to go ahead and select a number because you can always pick 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many companies that you guys have. Send method, same concept. It's going to give you all the same options. I want to pick however many days I want this to reprint after, and then set an end date for that. So that way I can hit allow scheduled print. I can go ahead and do that. And then same concept, if I have a letter or a default template that I already have filled out with the merge codes and the information that I want in that actual email, I can upload it and then view it through both of these buttons right here. So normally it would just be as simple as clicking this upload button or view button. I could go the upload route, which will then take me directly to my desktop on my computer. Or if there was a file in here, I could actually double click and look at it so that way I could get a preview. Since these are our best practices, there's not going to be anything in here to actually look at in that regard. And that's the reason why you're not seeing that information. Now, the parameters themselves, when it comes to MA versus Infinity, it's pretty much the exact same thing. You still have to fill in your field values, which it's going to still be a drop down for you. It's still going to give you your operator, the value that you have to type in or that's available for that field, and then use the and or concept over here on the right, which will essentially give you the option to be able to actually pick if you want both fields to be required versus one or the other. And as you can see, this one goes down an extensive list. This picks out every status, and it's saying it could be ready for finance or processing credit application or approved for processing credit or customer, so on and so forth. It's just giving you the different options here that can trigger this email to be shot out to your customer or to you if you want to set it up that way. Once that's done, you can either add a condition, or if you've determined that, hey, we don't need ready to contract on here, I could also delete that condition off of the list. So that way I can make it a little more specific if I need to. Or if I don't like the status that's in here, I could always just delete the status out and type in the appropriate status that I would want to actually fill in that space. Once I'm done, I can go ahead and hit save letter, and that will go ahead and put in all the information that I would need to go ahead and get that information into the system and ready to send out to our customer base. Any questions specifically about the letter writing tool and whether in Infinity or in MA? So you're asking in regards to seeing if there's a recipient list. So that being said, this is a little bit different than sending out like, let's say a mailing list, which is something they're currently working on to come fully operational for MA. And there was like a little glitch in the Infinity side that they're currently fixing. But so this isn't necessarily being targeted towards like a set list of people unless you potentially do, like an example would be if you're sending out letters. If you're using this from like the email perspective, this is moreover going to be targeting the moment I go on to an entity record, or let's say parts and service ticket, or even a deal desking ticket, whichever one of those three, just to kind of use as an example. If I change the status of my customer to, let's say, this status over to this, or let's say I do it based off of email address and customer buying this, it's not going to pull a list for you to see. It's just going to go ahead and start emailing out to those customers. So really, for a trackability standpoint, if you're trying to see, like, let's say I wanted to see every potential email that I shot out, you would want to go to the entity record that it's tagging that on. So you can look in the messaging center, or you can go into the messaging center and look at it from there, because it's going to show you every email that has been auto sent for you out to the customer. So that way it'll give you a complete list of like visibility on who is actually being sent these emails. So if you're ever using that as like a way to determine if, let's just say, if it's actually working, and if it's not, that would be the best way, is to go into your sent section of the messaging center to see what has actually been shot out under your name. But in regards to pulling up like a complete list of what all this is going to pull, that would be more of like an emailing list function. If you're trying to run, like, let's say a mail campaign or something like that specifically, that way you'll have that complete list. But in sense of letter writing, when you're setting this information up, it's not going to pull it directly in this tool and show you everybody that's, being sent that particular email or letter, if that makes sense.
Could you show, if you have duplicates of the same contact, could you show how to
address duplicates?
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. All right. So, and that's actually what I was going to jump into anyway. So that's perfect. Next time we're going to take a look at, and we're going to look at both, again, MA and Infinity. It's going to be very similar, but there will be slight differences. How to be able to address anybody that is a duplicate in the system. So in MA, under your quick links, you're going to go to the entity consolidation section. When you get in here, this is actually pretty straightforward when you get used to it. Up here at the top, it's going to ask you to add a filter. The filter is going to give you an option from this drop-down list to say, hey, what is it you're trying to look for? So in this case, I'm going to say first name first. And I know this exists in here. And then let's go ahead and hit add again. And I'm going to pick last name. Let's do test. Perfect. Hit add. Now, I wouldn't come down here and immediately hit the consolidation button because I don't actually have any data showing on my list yet. I would actually have to hit the search button first. Once I hit search, it's always going to ask me, or essentially inform me, that if there's anyone in the system, it could potentially be harmful for the search that I'm running. Always try to make sure everyone's signed out. And then for a beneficial standpoint, it does make sense, because at any point in time, you could be running a search on John Smith, and I could somehow magically during that date and time be entering in a John Smith that's a duplicate of something that already exists. So just letting you know, if there's nobody in the system, you're guaranteed to have a more clean search. So let's go ahead and hit yes. This is just letting me know that I have multiple entities locked up in the system, and until, I guess I didn't have any duplicates here on that one. Let's hit clear. Let's try and find, let's do last name solely, just for an example. Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of those in there. That's a guarantee. Yes. That's fine. Perfect. Okay. Now then, so I just did a really basic one because right now we're in our testing environment. Normally I could type in like John Smith and that would pull up like 20 different records if I was in a live environment. But in this case, it should be enough to kind of give an explanation of what to do. Now, one thing I want to show you is you're going to notice this little drop down for test is its own line, right? So when I minimize this, everything I just looked at disappears. What this indicates is that based off of the search that I ran, everything matches the criteria that I put into my search. So they're all touching one another. Now, what you may see, depending on how bad your duplicates are, or how much information you did and didn't put in there, is you may run into things that are separated by different filters, meaning that it could say Jonathan Smith here, and then John Smith is its own filter down below it. If they are not touching, they cannot be merged. Even if the name is almost the exact same and it says John Smith and the other one says Jonathan Smith, if these two lines, like how everything in here is kind of adjacent to each other and touching, if they're not touching, there's a gap, and it shows another one of those little sub-filter lines that I was just showing you right here. You cannot merge those records together. It will not allow you to do it. It doesn't matter if it's an Infinity or an MA. If they are not touching on this list how they're showing here, you will not be able to merge. Now, It's actually a very simple process to merge a customer in this system. So to give you an example here, everything in here on the left will always be set to ignore. It works the same way for both MA and Infinity in that regard. It's just trying to protect your customer data. If everything was set to merge by default, that would be a huge problem because anybody could accidentally hit this consolidate button and there goes your entire database, right? So by default, we set everything in here to ignore. If I want to keep something, so like let's say I've identified test as the primary record I want to keep, I'll have to pick keep in the drop down. And then let's say Heather test right here is the exact same customer, I would pick merge on her. That way I'm indicating that this record has the most data, it's got the most information. Anything that is duplicated, so like let's say they have the same work or home number, it's going to keep whatever's up here. But if there's an empty field like cell phone, Heather's phone number is going to essentially jump up into this person's field since it doesn't currently have that phone number filled out. After I've gone through and determined who all I want to merge, and if everybody else is, their own independent record and I don't want them to, I'll leave them ignore, and then I'll just come over to the bottom right-hand corner and hit consolidate. Now, the reason why I can't currently consolidate, it's just letting me know that I currently have users that are locked up in the system that are blocking me. And so in order to do that in MA, I would just essentially come up to the little man icon, hit the unlock tool, wait for it to load, go to the entities line, which is what it's telling me is currently locked up. So I'm going to go ahead and just unlock all of these. Close out of that. Come down, hit consolidate this time, and it should go through without any problems. There we go. Successfully merged the customers together. Now, you also do have one other way to find information in the system. Like if you're trying to be specific and it's not working, meaning that like, let's say you're working with a company and it's got like a set name and you are not able to find it under that. We do provide this wildcard marker up here, which is the asterisk, meaning that let's say somebody's name was Jonathan and all I did was put J-O in here with a star. And then I hit search. That's essentially going to pull up anybody's first name that starts with a J-O. It doesn't matter if it's John, Jonathan, Jonathan, whatever it could potentially be. It's going to try and pull anybody in there with a J-O in the beginning of their name. Which in this case, I guess we don't have any Joes, which is fine. But in the instance that there actually was like a Joel or a Joe or a Jonathan or something in our testing environment, that would pull up that information for us if we need it. You also have a history button down here. So if you're ever trying to see, what's been merged in the past, what's been searched for in that regard, you can always click on the history button and it'll break down to you what you've merged. That way, you know who did it on what day and time. That way, if they accidentally jack up your entire database, you know who to blame. And Infinity, a little bit different, but still pretty similar. All we would have to do from this standpoint is come up to the edit button up here at the top. Down here towards, let's see, where is it at? I'm looking for my consolidation. There it is, consolidate. You'll click on this line. It's laid out a little bit differently. So if I wanted to use first name, I just click the checkbox there, type it in. If I wanted to use last name, same concept again. Just put that information in there. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and do test for the first name instead. Now, this is very important. This is one of the key differences between Infinity and MA when it comes to the consolidation tool. And it's the one thing in Infinity that can get you in more trouble than anything. Never hit this automatic consolidation button. It is the best way to ruin everything in your database because I could put something as basic as a first name of Tyler and then accidentally hit automatic consolidation. And without it even looking to see if anything is similar or not, it's going to merge every single record in the system with the first name of Tyler. So
Be very careful.
Be very careful because like I said, it takes one button click and it ruins it all. So manual consolidation is what you'll want to essentially stick with because it will allow you to go down your list like what we just looked at in MA to validate that if what you're actually looking at is or is not a duplicate. Because imagine if all of these records just merged together without any control. That would not be good. And you don't have the ability to go back in there and break it back out. Once they're merged together, neither support, trainers, anyone cannot really help you in that regard. You're kind of stuck with a ruined record. So just keep that in mind. Same concept. If I wanted to be able to actually mark this as keep, merge, or ignore, it'll automatically default everyone to ignore. So there is no consolidation of records that doesn't need to do that with. But if I needed to be able to actually pick which one, I would just hit keep here and then go ahead and hit merge on this one. And then when I'm done, I just hit the consolidate button. That's okay. One of them is an employee, so that's the reason why I can't do that one. That's fine. Let's try this one right here. Go ahead and key, merge. Perfect. And consolidate. Yes. Perfect. Process is completed. They've been merged together. We're good to proceed. And that's essentially how easy it is to actually come in here and be able to actually merge your duplicate records together. But just remember, if you're doing the process of actually entering in a customer and you're doing it from the entry point of either adding a new contact in Infinity or adding a new entity record in MA, it's going to give you the option to look for those duplicates before you even create them. Now, I understand if you guys get transitioned over from a previous system to a new one, how that could potentially be, completely out of your hands because it's taking in all of the data that was already duplicated to begin with. So coming in here and cleaning it up could be a timely process, but once you get used to it, it becomes pretty quick and easy. So didn't see any hands raised, so we're good on that. All right. Last specific thing that I really want to talk about the CRM today with you guys, if we're going to stick to our time schedule here, is essentially I want to be able to review with you guys the difference between how Infinity does have the messaging center and where you can locate that in MA. So all the messaging center is, for those who use emailing, is it's an integrated tool that allows you to be able to look at any of your emails that you are sending or being received back into the system based on what kind of email setup you have. So if you have inbound and outbound, meaning that you can shoot it out and then also receive it back in, you'll be able to use this inbox, sent folder, close folder. It'll be merged with your actual Microsoft Live or Outlook or Gmail, depending on which one that you're currently using. It will give you the capability to essentially integrate those together. So that way, instead of having to go into my Outlook 365 inbox, I could be in Motility or in Infinity to be able to look at all of the emails that should be in that particular email. It also gives you the capability to be able to look at any of your drafts, your outbox if something gets stuck, any items that you may have deleted, or any emails that you may have marked as a high priority. Now, again, inside of Infinity, you'll notice it's merged with the CRM. It also gives me the option to look at my employee calendar, any notes that may have been tied to any records that I'm working with, as well as the task command center, which for any of those who are familiar with that, gives you the option to be able to look at any tasks that have been assigned to you or anyone else specifically in your dealership based off of the different parameters we have set up over here, being your active tasks, all tasks, meaning anything that's due, anything that's active, overdue, or completed will show underneath the all section. Your next 7 days worth of tasks, if you need to be able to look at that, any overdue or your completed. I also have the option to come down here and look at it by specific date ranges if I want to. So if I want to look at today's tasks, yesterday's tasks, anything set up week to date, last week, this month, 3 months to a year, you have all those different options. But if I don't want to use those preset parameters, I can always just come down to the drop downs and actually maneuver it the way I want to see it. So if I want to see everything from February 1st to the end of March, I could actually limit my parameters that way, hit refresh, and as you can see here, it pulls up every single task that falls within that realm that's actually due within that time period. It'll let me know what the status of them are, if they've been started, the due date, due time. And if I don't want as condensed as a screen for this, I also have a shortcut up here at the top that says tasks, which will take me to a complete open page in Infinity for the task commands if I need to be able to see them. So now, as you can see, instead of it being condensed on the CRM home screen, I actually have an entire platform for me to review if I need to see it. And same thing goes with your messaging center in Infinity. It also does have a shortcut to its own thing, but it is still, again, fused with the CRM as well. Whereas in MA, let me go ahead and minimize this. It actually has no section up here. It'll have the add new message, which will open up a shortcut to the messaging module, but it's not actually tied into the CRM. If I click here on the home screen, you're going to see it as its own module icon right here, which once I go into, will have that exact same layout that you saw in Infinity, from the messages to your employee calendar if you need to be able to see it, which if you, again, you're like a system admin such as myself, you'll have different calendars that you can actually review through. And then your task command center, which will allow you to review all of your tasks based off of whatever date ranges, again, that you want to set up and put in here. Only difference here is in MA, if I want to see this information displayed a little bit differently, I can move the field headers up here around in whatever order I want to see them in. That way, if I want to see who the tasks are assigned to more up towards the front, and if they've been completed or if they're an appointment, I can go ahead and maneuver that layout. And then once I'm done, hit save layout down here at the bottom right-hand corner. All right. So we've got roughly about 8 more minutes left on the CRM module itself. I'm going to kind of open this up for you guys to ask any direct questions on the CRM, and then we'll go ahead and transition. Oh, we got a question. Yeah, here, let me go ahead and click on the chat. Can you please remove the option if it will wreck the database? So if you're referring to the automatic consolidation, I believe there is a permission that can be turned on that will restrict anyone from being able to hit that button.
Can you show the difference between prospect and non-prospect? Yes, if there's a way to make it being inactive.
Inactive?
Yeah. So it's like in prospect versus non-prospect.
Okay.
The steps required to find a prospect if it's not a prospect.
Well, let's see here. Let's go into the CRM. There's a few different ways we could go about doing this. So you could create a status that would be, let's say, inactive for your entity record, which is the way I would honestly go about doing this. So when you're on your actual prospect, right? And I'll show you both in Infinity and MA just to be safe. And let's say we're going in here to determine if this is actual like an active customer or not active. That's what the status gauge is here for. So as you'll notice, right now I'm looking at Tyler Testing 2, which I created yesterday essentially, and I marked him as a new lead. If this isn't an actual active lead that I'm working, I could go right here and mark him as a dead lead. Then I can hit save, and voila, now he is no longer an active lead that I am actively working with. I've identified him as somebody who is not being followed up with. And then if I came up here to my advanced search or even to, like, let's say my category screen, I could actually review that. But let's go here into my status list. And let's say I wanted to pull up everybody who's currently not being worked. I could hit dead lead here, pick my salespeople. I want to see them underneath. So if I'm doing this for myself, let's say I'm salesperson A, and I'm wanting to see all of my non-active leads that I'm working, I could pick myself in the primary salesperson drop down. Select dead lead as the status, and then come over here and hit search. And essentially what that will do is if I have myself assigned as the sales rep and they're all marked as dead leads, it's going to pull in everybody in the system that's currently marked as a dead lead that I am assigned to. That way I have a complete list to be able to review and actually actively follow up on. And then if I even need to go as far as to determine, okay, let's say I don't want to keep looking at this list on this screen. I want to be able to navigate, do the things that I need to do. I can go ahead and export it to Excel. That way I can start following up with these customers that I marked as inactive to see if, potentially they'll come back at a future date, or maybe get more information as to why they stopped communication or left or became an inactive lead.
Sorry. Just for clarity.
Can you turn your?
Yeah, I got it.
Just for clarity on that, the reason we never delete, you can mark them as not a prospect, you can merge them if it's a duplicate, things like that, but we don't ever delete them completely from the database because let's say you wrote a service repair order on John Smith, and then we delete John Smith. If you ever went back into the history to try to review that repair order or that deal that customer was on, you would no longer have that data or know who you sold that unit to or who you did that service for. So that's why you'll see that instance in a lot of the parts of our system where nothing is ever truly deleted. It can just be marked inactive or put somewhere else or changed to where it doesn't, show up in the majority of your searches and things like that. But it's always there. It's never fully deleted, just like employees. We never fully delete them because if you look at a deal from 3 years ago, you'll want to see what salesperson it was, even if they don't work there anymore, and things like that. Just,
And again, as promised, I'll just show you in Infinity. It's the same concept. When you get to your actual entity record in here, my mouse real quick. Let's go and close the Task Command Center. And let's go to my little hot contacts list over here. So right here under status, again, it's just as simple, and there's quite a bit of other ones in here. So let's just say that this particular customer we do not sell to or unable to assist. Whatever inactive status you want to create for them or the reasoning behind why maybe the customer is becoming inactive. That's all you would have to essentially do right here is just mark them that. And then, of course, if you're trying to be as specific as you can be, you can come up to your temperatures, create your own list for those as well. So if they're like cold, cooling or something like that to indicate that the customer is essentially backing away from the deal, you do have the options on the temperature list too to help identify that as well if you need to. And then, yeah, that's all you would essentially have to do in the CRM system to essentially mark them as an inactive prospect. Let's go ahead and jump into unit inventory. Now, this one isn't going to take too long because there's not really a lot to talk about that either one of you guys probably don't already know in regards to the unit inventory system. But there is a main focus I do want to start off with because it is something that I've encountered a lot as a trainer lately, and I want to make sure everybody has a very firm understanding on how this process works. So I'm going to start off in MA and then I'll flip it to Infinity. It'll be the same thing in both. It's just laid out a little bit differently, and we're going to kind of review over that just to kind of get a good visualization of that information. Let me go ahead and line both of these up just to kind of give each of you guys a general visualization here. So in MA, for those who use Infinity, you're already used to how yours look, but I'll go ahead and preview this for you. You're going to have your unit inventory available units list auto-generate at all times on here. And this is, again, showing you what's available. So this isn't looking at your sold units. This is looking at your active inventory in the system. So if I don't want to constantly have to run searches up here, I can actually use this subs filter right here under stock number to find any direct stock number or unit that I'm trying to locate. Same thing goes for any other field right here. If I'm trying to find specific years, makes, models, anything like that, I don't have to run searches. I can literally just type in this information right here, hit enter, and it'll pull up anything that's a 2024 in our system. And then if I wanted to break it down even more and look for just adventures or Winnebagos or, specific models that may fall underneath one of those, I can go in here and keep filtering it down without having to run searches. So it's just kind of a huge benefit. And it is definitely a lot kind of easier to look for versus an Infinity where you have to hit the list, go in and type every time, search, and then go for a page at a time. Whereas I could just have this open, click from one stock number to the next. And I also have the capability to open up its like own little link to the unit without leaving this page if I need to. And I can also export it to Excel. So if I, again, don't want to have a screen at all times pulled up based off of what I'm searching for, I can run a search, sub-filter it down, and then export that information into an Excel document. Makes it very simple. Now, the process that I'm referring to is the displaying a unit on the internet. That tends to be one of the more time-consuming processes that I run into with dealerships in regards to trying to get that feed set up. There's a few different ways you can do it, and there's some information that I do want to disclose to you on this call to kind of help you in the future if it's something that you ever plan on or intending on doing, or if you're currently running into any problems with it as we speak. So when we go into a unit, there's going to be two different ways you can do this. Way number one, which is usually the most suggested route, is you'll go to the internet tab directly on the unit itself, and you're going to fill in this information. Now I'm going to hit show more just so we can kind of see everything here. Perfect. All right. So on the internet tab itself, it's going to have some specific information that needs to be filled out. It's going to ask you for, again, location, the year of the unit, the make, the model, and no, it does not pull it from the fields that are already filled out for make and model. And the reason for that is because these are separate fields. You'll notice it says internet make and internet model. It doesn't say just make or model. So you'll have to put that information into the system right here. After that, it gives you some different options between our price, sales price, special price. Just if your website has multiple prices it likes to display, you can go ahead and fill those in. So when it exports over, you get that done. And then the rest of the information is just optional stuff that you want to include if you want to go that far. Also, the same goes for the sales description. Whatever I want to type out about this unit and then have ported over to the website as a sales description, you can do that as well. Now, the problem most people run into is they do not communicate with their third-party website provider. They just assume that once this integration gets established, that everything is going to pull over correctly. That is incorrect. The thing that I can tell you, and the reason we're recording this is so that you'll have access to this information later, is whenever you say that you want to do this, whether it's with support, if you bring on a new location, whatever it may be, when you say you want to do an internet port over, it's very important that you run some testing before you even go live. That way you can make sure that when you're sending units to your website, that whatever stuff that the third-party website provider has to pull in, they're set up to do so. Because more often than not, when this gets set up and the integration gets going, it takes weeks because nobody understands that when your website provider says they're good to go, that just means they're good to receive whatever we're sending them in a file. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to actually receive what we're sending them in the file, because if they don't have their port set up on their side to receive that data or any specifications that you're trying to send to them, they'll never receive it, they'll never pull it in, and it will take a very long time for the development team to actually dig into it by that point. So just as a key note, if you ever plan on using this internet tab to export out your inventory to your website, make sure you communicate with your third-party website provider to ensure they know what they're actually being sent in that file. And we will be more than helpful on our side to make sure that we tell you exactly what's being sent, because usually we can send them an example of what's actually being sent in the file itself if we ever need to. So, and all you have to do to actually kick that information over to your website is just check this box right here. It usually will port out anywhere between 12 a.m. in the morning to 1 a.m. in the morning. That way, nobody's in the dealership. No one's adding anything that could potentially mess up the list. It's giving a good ample amount of time to update the website. So that when you come into work the next day, you can check the website before you even open to determine if the units you're looking for are actually being pushed over to your website. Now, there is a second way to do this. So in the event that you are one of those dealerships where you actually have a whole bunch of information that you keep stored on your website regarding the units that you're trying to sell, and the fields that we have listed on this internet tab don't line up with all the fields that are required to fill in to your website, the second route to do this is leave this tab completely blank, meaning that location, year, make, model, all of that needs to be absolutely empty. And what will happen is when you click the display on internet box, because it's also located up here at the top of the actual unit itself, is it's going to look at any of the other fields. So for example, this RV motorized field, it's going to look at all the other fields that are available on the unit and pull that data instead. But if you even have one field filled out on the internet tab, whether that's a price, make, or model, or something just super basic, it will completely ignore everything else and just port whatever's on the internet tab. So those are your two routes to go for exporting inventory onto your website. You can either leave the internet tab blank and it'll pull the rest of the data that's available on the unit for you, or you can fill in the internet tab and it'll pull just specifically from there. That way, if you're not trying to overload your website, you're not pulling everything that's included in the actual unit and unit inventory itself. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions about that or the process that goes along with that? Let's go ahead and pull this up in Infinity and just kind of show you the same thing real quick. I won't go through and talk about all the same stuff again. It's just going to be more from a preview standpoint. So to get to unit inventory in Infinity, as you're already well known, you go back to your home screen, just click on the unit inventory right here. It'll populate its own tab open for you. Again, key difference here, when I go into MA, my inventory list is already displaying. I don't have to run any kind of searches. It's a very neat and clean list. Whereas in Infinity, you don't necessarily have that. You have to run in here and do a search. So if I click search right here and then hit list, and I just leave all that blank, it's just going to pull in everything that I have in inventory. Now, of course, if I didn't want to see anything that was sold, I could have went through my list and actually filtered that down. But this is one of the key differences here between MA and Infinity. I actually have to go in here and search for my list and filter it down to what I'm wanting to see versus MA, which will actually give you the capability and functionality of being able to just see that list automatically without putting any information into it. All right, so let's click on a unit here. When we get in here, your internet tab is going to be kind of clustered up here with the other tabs that we have in the system. It's laid out differently. Instead of it being kind of free fill lines, they're all drop-down boxes, except for a few of them. You also have a breakdown of the accessories listed right here, as well as the sales description. It's just laid out differently on this page. But if I do need to mark it as displayed, it's still available on this particular tab and up here at the top as well. It's just, again, the layout of it's just a little bit different, but all the information and functionality for that respect still operate the same way. It's just that you have to go through a few more hoops in Infinity versus MA, where it's a little more direct in that regard for the unit. Okay. Now, overall, the unit is actually one of the best places inside of our system to be able to track history of things that have been done. And what I mean by that is it gives you, say more specifically here, it gives you shortcuts to different modules. So under the financial tab, as an example, if I scroll down here, if this unit was tied to a deal, I could actually shortcut my way straight to the deal by hitting view. If I needed to see any work that's been done on this particular unit by the service department, I can go to the service tab right here, and this will actually show me any ROs that have been open or that are currently open that I can either reprint out or actually open up to view what repairs have been done for that unit. So from a sales standpoint, it also helps me understand exactly how much the cost is being boosted up or something like that, because it's also tracking all of the work being done to the unit and how it's affecting the total cost of the unit itself under the financial tab, where it will actually display your total cost, any additional costs, and add-on and repair costs being added to your purchase price right here. It also has a really good way of, if let's say that you are using the internet option and you're wanting to export out photos, both systems give you the option, whether it's an Infinity or an MA, to be able to send out any images that you've tied directly to the unit itself. So it could be anything that's like, you know, an actual preview of the unit, or it could be disclosure information, whatever it may be. You can put that image listed here in whatever order that you uploaded in, meaning that if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's the order the units are going to actually, images are going to actually upload to the unit itself. And for those who are unfamiliar with what accessories are or in regards to the unit itself, they're just different potential add-ons that you could have set up as a CAN job or directly as an accessory that may be set up for a specific unit that you traditionally have to change out when you purchase that unit in. So like, let's say that there's a certain make or model that you bring in that every time you have to change out the mirrors or the hitch that's tied to that unit. Well, instead of me having to go into parts and service and finding this unit and getting all that stuff started, I could actually start from the accessories tab right here by hitting add new. And if I have that CAN job or that accessory code set up in the system, I can just pick from the drop down list, which as you see here, it tells me what the retail price and cost are already. And then I would just check the box here and it'll give me the option to go ahead and start a service ticket. It's going to ask me what I want to start my service ticket on. I can go ahead and do that right here. And it went ahead and created the invoice up here at the top for me. In addition to that, I can now go over to my service tab and voila, it's going to show me the document that I just created for that particular unit. So that way, if I want to shortcut myself over to the service module, I can click right here and view the repair order itself. And that's moreover what I mean by unit and inventory. If you go directly to a unit, you can shortcut your way to any module, because if you have a deal on it, if it's a service RO, any kind of work that you're trying to track, it's usually accessible through the history or through the different shortcuts that we offer you on the unit page directly if you need to be able to pull that information up. Now, in addition to that, there are a few other things too that commonly get overlooked for units and unit inventory that I'm going to go ahead and talk about. Template being one of them. So all a template is it's kind of an outline of a unit that you commonly have to stock into inventory. So like, let's say that you have like a very specific make or model that's usually what you're selling out to your customer base. It's like your most common sold unit that you potentially have there at your dealership location. It's giving you essentially the option here to create a template for that unit. So that way, the next time you need to enter the unit into the system, you can just copy using the multi-unit copy button down here, that particular unit, and it doesn't count it as being a live actual unit that's affecting your cost or any kind of GLs in your actual inventory, simply because it's identifying that we're not purchasing this unit. It's just a template there, like a placeholder for me to be able to use for copying features. So if I wanted to do that, I would just mark this unit as a template, come down to the bottom, hit multi-unit copy. It wants me to save this before I do that. That's fine. I can hit this multi-unit copy button, and it's going to copy everything from the pricing to the unit information, so on and so forth. The only thing it's going to require me to manually enter in is the stock number and the VIN number and the color of the unit itself. So if I want to be able to add multiple in, let's say I've got like 4 or 5 of these that I'm getting ready to stock into inventory, and I don't want to go through and manually do this every single time, I can simply just type here, put in whatever my stock numbers are going to be, so on and so forth, which, well, you know what, I'll only do 2 for right now. I'm not going to sit here and go down this whole list. But if I wanted to put the VIN numbers in and the colors and all that in, I could. And then all I would have to do from that point is hit create units, and it will actually go ahead and stock those units in the inventory. The only thing I'd have to do from that point moving forward is create the purchase transaction for the unit itself by going into the accounting portion of the unit. And that operation works the same way in Infinity. Up here towards the top, it should have, let's see, where did we go? Where's my financial tab? Yep, yeah, there we go. Never mind. It's going to be under the unit description. Okay. So under your unit description, here's where you're going to actually find the template button. You just check the box there for that and here. And then again, if you were to flip back over towards the bottom, you can go ahead and copy the unit if you wanted to. Same kind of concept. I can go ahead and just copy it into however many units I want to do. And Infinity essentially offers out the same option. Now, there is one more checkbox by default that most people don't use unless you guys actually, operate this business. But if you want to mark in our system a unit as a rental unit, in order to account that as a rental unit, you actually have to check this box here. If you do not do that, it will not actually be viewable on any of the rental unit lists in the rental module if that's something that you do use. And if it's something that you're planning on doing for your business down the road, just get with us during that time period and I can kind of walk you through everything that needs to go in the system for that. But between these 2 check boxes, they're both typically overlooked, but the template is super useful, again, for if you're constantly bringing in the same kind of unit. And then rental unit, this is the only way this system's actually going to identify that it's a rental unit in our system, whether that's MA or Infinity. Okay. Does anybody have any specific questions that you guys would like us to cover in regards to unit inventory? This module itself is pretty straightforward and direct. There's not a lot to it outside of entering a unit or doing it as a PO that I can really kind of walk you through from an advanced standpoint. So I'm going to kind of open the floor on this particular module to see if anyone's got any direct questions.
On the MA side, is there an update on when you're going to be able to put a negative number into the purchase price?
So when you say like a negative number, are you talking?
So like I do a deal, let's say I do a trade and, the trade's going to be negative $1,000, for example. I'm not putting money into it because right now when I go into Motility, it flashes a little red thing and it won't let me put a negative in for the purchase price. I can do it in Infinity, but I can't do it in Motility. And then it doesn't, so if I go into Infinity, it displays the negative number. If I go into MA, it leaves it blank. It doesn't show the negative.
I got you. So when you're bringing in the trade, that is information that I can ask about. I don't know if there's like I know that I submitted a ticket, so I know they're working on it. I'm just wondering.
there's
Okay.
any update.
What's that ticket? And we can kind of look into that for you today at least.
Are you pricing the unit at, or your cost for the unit is like negative 1,000?
Correct.
Well, this is on a trade?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to check the case and see what, as far as when it would start allowing you to do that or if it will. I'd have to
I
look into
mean,
that.
it still works. I can go in Infinity and put it in, just in MA because we're trying to get everyone over to use that.
Yeah.
It doesn't show it. So
Gotcha. And you wouldn't have it in as a negative like for the ACV and just take that in as profit on the deal that it came in on, or you're trying to have it in excuse me, in inventory as a negative 1,000 on the cost.
right, that's our owner's old school, so he wants.
Gotcha.
Okay.
No worries. But yeah, we can definitely look into that for you and try and get some more information for you available on that.
Okay.
What location are you from, Corey?
Lake Region RV or Rugby Homes.
Perfect. Okay.
Someone's also asking what's the difference between rental status and the rental button?
So rental status, for those asking that question, the rental button is essentially what is identifying that it's an actual rental unit, whereas the status could just be what particular status that rental unit is sitting in. So it could be very well that you're doing work on that rental unit, right? So it's possible that it's not available at the time versus the rental button is saying, hey, this is actually a rental unit. This isn't a live inventory unit that they're trying to sell to a customer. This is a rental unit that they're trying to rent to a customer. So inside of the rental module, that is essentially what allows the vehicle to be picked as a rental unit in there. Because if it's not checked in unit inventory as a rental unit, it will not populate in the rental module as a unit that's available to be used as a rental, if that makes sense. The status is just dictating if the unit's ready to be rented versus, if there's work being done or if it's out currently by a customer already versus one that's available on the lot to be, rented out that particular day. So that's the differences between those two particular things. That'll give us extra time for Deal Desking anyways. So, all right, guys. Well, if I don't have any more questions in regards to unit inventory, then what we'll do is we'll take an earlier break than what was planned, but then we'll utilize that extra time to actually cover more about Deal Desking because I'm sure there's going to be a lot more questions about that than unit inventory. And honestly, it usually takes me just going through one system an hour and a half to go through Deal Desking. So having to split it between the two, that'll actually give us a little more time to be able to jump back and forth. So at this time, if you guys would like, you can stay in the actual lobby itself. I'm going to pause the recording so that way you guys aren't getting like a full, review of absolutely nothing. But we'll be back in about 15 minutes. And if you guys, you have any questions in the meantime, shoot them in the chat. And when we get back, we'll make sure to answer those questions for you. Sound good to everybody? If you do have a question, Morgan, and it's not coming through your chat, just feel free to go ahead and type it into the chat and we'll address it then as well if you'd like. Because it doesn't appear to be coming through the mic currently, which sometimes will happen. The Zoom audio can be a little funny at times. I guess for now, we'll go ahead and get rolling. And like I said, Morgan, if you want to type your question in the chat, we'll make sure it gets answered. I'm going to take this from the way I normally train most dealerships, and I'm going to do it in both systems, essentially from start to get to the deal point. So I don't train people to actually start their deals with their quotes from the Deal Desking module. I actually train them to start it from the CRM, and I'll explain as I'm taking you through this as to why I do it this way. All right, so if everybody can see my screen, as you'll notice, I went ahead and pulled up an entity record that I had already started working on. So the reason why I start quotes from the CRM versus Deal Desking is effectively, if the process is being completed correctly, it allows you to go ahead and collect all the information that you're going to need for that quote and or deal that you're wanting that particular salesperson and or sales manager to start, instead of going straight into the module and not verifying if the customer information page is actually filled out correctly. And what I mean by that is when you get into the entity record, whether it's Infinity or MA, you will have these tabs laid out across the top that will indicate different bits of information specifically for that customer. That being said, there is a key difference between MA and Infinity in regards to how you can actually layer out these tabs. So in MA, you are given the option over here through this black pencil to manage the order of the tabs as well as to see the tabs as they display when you're looking at this record. Now, in order for that pencil to actually be clickable, you have to edit at the bottom, click right here, and then hit the Manage Tabs button. Once you click on that, it's going to pull up every tab that is available for an entity record. Now, granted, this could be different versus somebody who's in accounting or a standard salesperson on which tab they need to be able to see. So like a sales rep, for example, would never need to be able to see the AP info or the AR info tab. That has nothing to do with them getting a deal started. It has everything to do with the accounting side. So from that standpoint, this is something that an accountant would have. But normally and traditionally, what I will do is I will have your salespeople and sales managers order out the list of the tabs in the order that you see displayed here on the screen. Now, since this is being recorded, if you want to know what the order is, you can always refer back to it. But essentially, I always like to layer it out by lead info, co-buyers, unit preference, vehicles owned, units trades tab. And then if you guys have emailing or texting, setting it up to the messaging tab and the SMS tab next. Now, the reason I put it in this order is because essentially everything I'm going to need to start a deal is now put in an appropriate order for me to go ahead and put that information in. So let's go ahead and look at it in MA first. I would start on my lead info tab, always make sure that I have a primary sales contact selected. And then for just a marketing standpoint, I would want to have my advertising lead and lead type information filled out. After that, I could then transition over to my co-buyers tab. And it's pretty simple to do this. All I have to do to add a co-buyer here is to hit this line and type in their entity number right here. If I don't know what the entity number is, all I have to do to simply find my prospects before I start filling in information, because if they exist, I, of course, don't want to duplicate. I would hit the magnifying glass right here, which would then give me the option to run a search for my co-buyer. So if they already have a record in the system, there's no sense in creating a second one. Just go ahead and find them on this list by simply typing in any kind of name information that you currently have. And then you just double click and it would tie the co-buyer to the entity record. After that, unit preference, I'm essentially just picking what unit the customer is actually interested in. Now I have two different routes in MA that I can take on this as well. Simply being, add the prospect line, and if I know the stock number, I can just simply type it in or paste it in there, and it will auto-generate all of my information into the field. Now, if I don't know the stock number off the top of my head, but I do have a general idea of what unit of interest the customer has, I can click on the magnifying glass again. This will pull up an inventory list, but this is a key difference that you got to make sure you always do. Now, when you come in here, since this inventory list is tied to the CRM, it doesn't filter out your sold units automatically. So what you have to do is come up to the sub filter right here, click on the wine glass, and make sure you select is false. When you do that, and then you go to search your inventory the way that I just did right here, it's going to only pull in your active units. It's not going to pull in any of the sold units. So that way I could actually get a more concrete list of units pulled up that are actually available in inventory versus accidentally selecting a sold unit. But it's pretty simple. Like I said, if I'm looking for a specific unit type, I could always come over here to the make field, type into that what I want it to be equivalent to, or if I don't like this criteria, I can actually change it to contains, which is actually a better one in my opinion, because then it allows you to type in specific words instead of the whole name. And then you can filter it down if you need to. But essentially, this just gives you a list of your inventory that's actively available that you can then select to put into that field versus the stock number that was previously there. Now, a lot of people get the unit preference and the vehicles tab confused. Let me explain this. The vehicles tab is just what unit the customer currently owns, whether they purchased it from you, and in which case, whether that's MA or Infinity, it will automatically generate that unit onto the vehicles tab for you because they purchased it from your dealership and updated it in the system. Or if it's a brand new customer who's never visited before, you will be responsible for coming down here, hitting the add vehicle button, and then as you see what I did across here, manually fill in the information for that unit. The reason this is useful isn't just from a sales perspective, but this also helps parts and service as well. Because not only can I track the sales history on this unit since it's tied to the entity record now, but it also allows me to track the service history. So if I need to see any open ROs on this unit, or if I need to be able to tie the unit to an RO, if it's already located in this vehicles tab, it's already giving you that sales rep, service rep, whomever, the option to go ahead and add that unit. In addition, from the sales perspective, another benefit to this would be if I don't want to have to double entry, meaning fill in the vehicles tab and the unit trades, I can come down here to the bottom and hit add to trades tab, and it will automatically port my unit over into my unit's trades without me having to type that information back in again. So if you want to save yourself some time, that's a solid way to go about that process. Now, those first 5 tabs are the only 5 tabs that you need to kind of fill in to get your deal or your quote started, because it's going to pull in from those 4 primary tabs, or sorry, 5. So when I go to lead info, I scroll back down to the bottom, you'll notice that I have a start view or start new quote, and I also have a view last deal. So before I hit the start new quote button, let me explain this view last deal button. This works for quotes and deals, meaning that if I start a quote and I haven't transitioned it to a deal, I can click on that button and it'll jump me straight to that entity records quote that's currently open and being worked. Or if it's closed and already been sold, it will just take you to the most recent deal that was available for that customer. So if I need to see if it's open versus closed, I can always click on that button as well, and it will at least direct me to the most previous quote or deal that's available in the system. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the start new quote button right here. This is going to pretty much work the same way for Infinity MMA. The layout's just going to look a little bit different, but the most important step here is step 1, always making sure that you pick a preset. If you pick the wrong preset, you potentially take the chance of loading in the wrong fees, taxes, back-end items, so on and so forth. It's just important that you're actually picking the appropriate preset for what you're trying to accomplish. So in this case, I'll just pick new deal. Since I started it from the entity record, it went ahead and pulled my entity profile down here. So I don't have to worry about typing that information and finding the right customer, which is what you do run into when you try and start a deal from Deal Desking. And then if I have the permissions and I know this customer is buying today, I could jump it straight to a deal. But 9 times out of 10, the start new quote option is what I advise most people to do. Once you jump past that, it's going to take you into like a 4-square screen where essentially it's going to have you verify the information you're wanting to bring into your quote. So if I'm wanting to bring in, let's say, this particular unit up here at the top, my trade, my co-buyer, as well as my default salesperson, I can check all those boxes and then hit apply. If I was trying to bring everything in here, in which case I duplicated the unit here, and I don't want to bring in 2 of the exact same unit, I could just hit the check all items checkbox right here, and it'll essentially check every box off for you without you having to manually go through each section and checking. Once you're done, just hit apply, and this should jump us straight into our quote screen. All this is telling me is that this unit has been essentially tied to another deal. And if I want to be able to continue to use this unit, even though it's on another deal, I have to hit add to deal. Otherwise, I can hit cancel and try and bring in a different unit. It's all good if a unit's tied to another deal. It's just trying to help indicate that, hey, you may be competing with somebody else to try and sell this unit. So in the event of that happening, it's always good to have a backup unit, available and ready for what the customer's looking for. Fine with me. That's just letting me know my VIN number is not a legitimate one. That's okay. Close that out of the way. And voila, we went ahead and opened up our quote screen. Now, I'm going to do the same steps in Infinity real quick, just so I can get it caught up. And then we're going to go into essentially the detailed information on working a deal dash quote, some of the things you can and cannot do from both MA and Infinity, and just some of the key differences on the layouts here for you available in MA versus in Infinity and vice versa. So let's go ahead and flip over to Infinity. Same concept here. I can go straight into the CRM if I want to. I can pick one of my other test customers here off my list, so that way I'm not doing the same record twice. And then I can go ahead and start working through. Now, again, one difference between MA and Infinity here is when you're in this record, I don't have the ability to move around these tabs the way I need to. I can click on them, but I don't have the way to pick the order that I want to set them in. So that's one kind of useful thing in MA that Infinity doesn't offer, is it does give you the ability to layer this out. Now, I am fully aware of both systems, so I can kind of move through this faster than most would. So in lead info, again, I would just make sure this information is filled out. I would then go to my co-buyers tab over here. If I wanted to include one, all I would have to simply do is click in here. And instead of a magnifying glass in Infinity, you get more of these triple dots. So you can click on that, and that will actually give you the option to go in here and search for your entity record like in MA. It's just a little bit different layout, a little bit different options here. After that, I could then move over into my unit preference, which will be right here. Same concept. I won't have a magnifying glass, but I do have the option here to actually click on the triple dots, come into my inventory. This is a little bit easier to uncheck as sold, hit search, and then voila, it pulls up my active units. Now, in MA, when you need to delete something off of a record, there's a delete button. And in Infinity, you don't have a delete button, but in the event that you accidentally added too much, all you have to do to get rid of this is to highlight the box itself, and then on your keyboard, just hit the delete key. This will give you the option to go ahead and remove it off. All right, from this point, I would then want to go over to my vehicles tab. If I want to include a vehicle that the customer is interested in trading, I would go ahead and fill all this information out. Once I'm done with this, I can scroll down to the bottom of the actual trade section itself, and it does still have the add to trades tab that you can then port it over to the trade tab if you need to. Then if I was actually trying to work with the trade here, right next to unit preferences, unit trades, you'll be able to come in here, fill out the information as you would normally, as well as if there's any trade allowance, ACV, or any kind of other information that needs to be included for this particular unit that they're trying to trade. After that, I can go right back to my lead info tab, just like I did in MA. I can view my last deal or quote, or if I'm ready to go, I'll go ahead and hit save, and then go ahead and start a new quote. It'll do the same thing. It'll open up a portal into Deal Desking for me. The layout's a little bit different. It automatically pops this page up right here to where instead of having like a drop down to look for, you'll actually have all of your presets listed out here in one open view. That way it makes it a little bit easier from that perspective. And then your entity record is already being selected here, so I don't have to go through the process of selecting the line and hitting start and quote. It's already accounting for that customer for me. All I would have to do is hit start and quote. And again, it'll bring you back to the same 4-square screen, in which case I only have these two filled out this time. I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. It's just letting me know the unit I've selected is also on hold. That's fine. I'll hit yes to continue. It wants to know if I want to update the price. I'll hit yes. Give it just a second. And voila. Now it's got both loaded. So I'm going to, since I've already got Infinity pulled up, I'm going to go ahead and start kind of working through the different tabs here to explain what you can and cannot do. So first and foremost, when you bring it in as a quote versus a deal, there's 3 standard things you will not have the functionality to be able to do, whether that's in Infinity or MA. Starting with, you cannot take a quote, or sorry, you cannot take a deposit when it's sitting in a quote status. Reason for that is there's no commitment from the customer. They haven't said they're going to actually purchase. All they've done is expressed interest. So if you try and come in here and go to the deposit sections, whether that's MA or Infinity, and add a new deposit, it's going to try and stop me from cashing this deposit out, because you'll notice it says you must turn this quote to a deal before adding a deposit. Second thing you cannot do is you cannot push to app 1. Simply because why would you try and run like an appraisal or get credit or any of that information if it's a quote? You would want that to be a deal, because that's the customer saying they're ready for the next step. So when you're ready to actually try and get that information, you'll have to make sure to transition this from a quote to a deal. Third thing you cannot do is you cannot add accessories and start a service RO off of them. You can go ahead and put the accessories on the quote itself, but the moment you try and go in here and hit the start service icon down here towards the bottom, I'm going to max screen this for us. it will not let you essentially start that particular invoice. So just make sure those three things, if you're ever trying to do any of those three things, that you transition it from a quote to a deal first before attempting. Otherwise, you're just taking up additional time on yourself. All right. Quote tab itself is where the majority of the information that a sales manager, GM, finance manager will operate out of. If you want to know what the difference between the quote tab and the buyer's order tab is simply the buyer's order tab does not display cost. Moreover, meaning that if you're wanting your salespeople to be able to see a deal or quote without them seeing the back end numbers of how much, the potential unit's going to profit, you can remove the cost section out by having them simply just use the buyer's order tab, which that is a permission both in Infinity and in May that you can set up to restrict viewing certain tabs from groups that you don't want to have access to, right? In addition to the quote tab, not only do you have the option to, like I said, fill out, review your deal, use all that information, but you also have the option here to add in any of your aftermarket products that you may sell, adjust any of your fees on the fly. So if there's anything in here that by default is wrong, and you want to go ahead and just adjust it for that specific deal and then go back to the presets and mess with it, any of these fields are typable. So I can click into it, adjust it. And if I zero it out, it'll go ahead and uncheck sold for me right here. Yep, you'll notice I put a 0 on your processing fee, and then now that checkbox went ahead and unchecked. And the moment I type a dollar amount back into that field, should mark it back as sold for me. Perfect. The memo tab, this is more of a use for if you're using like our default buyer's order form, some of our other default documents that are set up to actually pull from these specific fields. So if there's any information that you're wanting to generate on any of your customers' paperwork, so such as their buyer's order form, you would want to type in the buyer's order memo section. Again, same thing in both MA and Infinity. It works the same. It'll give you the option here. And whatever I type here and go to print out a buyer's order form on, it will actually pull that memo section in there into a comments box to kind of help give your customer whatever additional information you're trying to provide for them to be able to read. Now, a key difference here between Infinity and MA is how you print out your documents. So in Infinity, you have the print docs button right here underneath the quote tab in its own section with all of the different buttons listed out for you to be able to select. And usually how this works is there's a setting, and in Infinity, the way you would get to this is hit edit, modify, and you'll see something that says the buyer's order print list set right here. This lets you go in here and create deal jackets, essentially, if you're familiar with the terminology. So if you have like a new car pack versus a used unit pack, meaning that there's certain documents that go for the new side of sales versus the used side of sales, you can create those in here and put whatever forms need to be tied to them. You can also do it for banks. So as you see here as an example, there's a US Bank section. So if I was to click on US Bank, it would print out any form that US Bank would be expected for you as a dealership to have signed by the customer and then sent back if you need to. Now, in MA, the difference here is instead of having this layout, just to give you a quick review, minimize that real quick. Let's go ahead and close down, right down here. You're going to notice at the bottom, your print docs button is actually listed out here instead of being listed in your quote tab. Just like the layout is more essentially fitted for you to be able to review a lot of this information without it being all crushed together, which is one thing in Infinity that it kind of gets a little bit hectic, is because everything is being essentially shoved onto one section of the page. Whereas in MA, you actually have it kind of broken out a little bit neater and more spaced out. And then your other options, such as like sending to app one, starting a service RO, uploading any documents, or printing out your documents will be listed down here in this bottom line. All right. That is essentially the quote tab. One other thing here too that always usually tends to get kind of overlooked is if you're wanting to be able to, let's use this as a better example. Let's say I want to roll my payments, which I'm trying to actually scroll down into a problem with that. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can fit the screen better. I apologize. The lobby that I'm currently using is cutting off this down here in Infinity. So I'll just demonstrate this in MA real quick because it'll be a little bit easier for me to show you. Go ahead and pull that up. So the rolling payment feature works the same way in both tools. It's just in different locations. So over on the right in MA, under the quote tab, you'll find it. On the bottom left in Infinity is where it'll be found. But if I'm playing hardball with a customer, and let's say that we're working here, let's go ahead and turn this into a deal, working a finance deal. Close out of that. We'll pick our finance source up here. Go ahead and scroll down. Let's look at what our payment ranges is. Let's go ahead and do 180 here. We'll keep our interest rate the same. Oh, well, that's why the unit's $1 million. Okay, that looked a little weird. All right, so let's say that this customer is trying to get a specific payment type rolling here, right? Let's say that they're telling you the most that they can pay per month is $13,500, but the current quote that we're giving them is estimating their payment amount around $14,622. In order to make this a lot easier on yourself to where you don't have to do all the math on a calculator and try and figure it out in your head, you can type in the desired payment required that you're looking for, hit enter, and once it populates, it's going to give you these different lines up here. So essentially what each of these options are telling you is if I wanted to roll my base selling price down to make that payment achievable, that's one route I could take. If I had a trade included and I wanted my trade allowance to be marked at 98,000 versus whatever it was marked at, we could get the payment down that way. If the customer is willing to put 104,000 down in cash, we can roll it that way. Or if the customer is able to get a better APR rate for them to use, I could essentially just click on that, give it a second to load. And once it finishes processing, it will adjust our payment amount to the amount I put into that payment required field. Give it just one moment because it's having to change a few things specifically with the deal. In the meantime, while that's loading, jump back into Infinity and continue forward. Back to that page, I'll show you exactly how it updated it. Now then, so again, this is the quote tab. It's just trying to give you all of your deal specifics. Buyer's order tab is the same thing, except it won't have your cost field. So essentially, you could still work the deal here. You just wouldn't be able to see truly what the cost is and the gross profit that you'd be making on this unit if you do use this tab. Jumping over to the next tab is actually one of my personal favorites. It works the same way, both in an Infinity and MA. They're both laid out very similarly. The only difference here is you won't have like these drop-down boxes up at the top. It'll be kind of mixed in down here with this section. But for those who have used this before, the comparison tab is a good way to be able to essentially shift your deal around when a customer is trying to play hardball. And what I mean by that is let's say that the base selling price, as you see up here, they asked if there was a way that they could get a discount and what that would have cost to if they were also to get a higher interest rate in return. So let's say that they get a lower selling price, but a higher interest rate, more payments overall. And then they'll even be straightforward and bring 3,000 down as a delivery. I could also go to this next box over here and change it to whatever I want it to be. And same thing goes for the fourth box. I usually leave the first one alone. That way I have a default to reset my deal. So what I'm going to do now is if this is how I want my deal to reflect, I can hit the apply button right here. Give it a second, flip back over to my quote. And now you'll see my payment amount and everything else that I put in that field has adjusted to what originally I was setting it for. Base selling price updated. My cash on delivery has been listed on there, and then my actual payment amount has been dropped down to $458. If I want to flip this back to what I originally had it as, no worries. I just come back into the same tab, hit apply, and it will revert it back to what I had it as previously. You'll notice my payment amount adjusted back up, everything loaded back in the way I had it, so on and so forth. That's the real use for the comparison tabs. It's just to kind of give you a quick, easy viewpoint to be able to make a fast adjustment if you need to. Buyers tab, this is straightforward. This is just essentially looking at whatever buyer is being listed in the system. If I had a co-buyer, it would have a section for that as well. As you'll see right here, it mentions co-buyer. But since I don't have one added to this particular deal, it's just looking at the primary buyer, which if I need to adjust any of their information, anything that I adjust right here will actually adjust the entity record in the CRM as well. Let's go ahead and turn this into a deal. That's okay. And then if I need to add a co-buyer, if I forgot to do so at the beginning of this step, I could essentially just come down here and hit the add buyer - co-buyer button, and that would give me the option. Works the same way in MA as well. Units, this is just reviewing what units we actually have assigned to the deal. Yes, you are allowed to have multiple units on a deal. Do I suggest that? No. Simply because usually the maximum amount of units that you can work and have it print on the buyer's order multi-print form would be 3. So, and most of the time, most dealerships like to break their units out in separate deals anyways. It's better for financing and accounting, and it's easier to track that information instead of trying to look at a lump sum number. You have your trades tab here. Essentially, again, if I forgot to add the trade from the entity record, I can click this drop down if I had one listed on the entity record, and it would autofill in the information once I have it selected. If I don't have it set up on the entity record, I can still go ahead and put the information on the trades tab itself if I need to directly. Just makes it a little easier. Accessories tab is the same thing I was referring to in unit inventory. It works the exact same way in deal desking. All I have to do is pick whatever code I have on my drop-down list right here. Or if I don't have what I see here on the drop-down list and I want to search for one specifically, I can click the ellipsis, but just for the sake of training, I would select that item. I do have it marked as a deal now instead of a quote. All I would have to do to proceed forward is when I'm ready, come down here to the bottom, hit Start Service RO. And you'll notice it shows up here, Add to RO. So as long as that's checked, it's going to go ahead and include it when I create that. And now it went ahead and created my service invoice. Okay. And once you have an RO started, it takes it out of the accessory, and the same thing goes for the part here too. So if I had like a specific part number that I knew I wanted to add in here, I could, but it takes them from this section right here and it jumps it down into the pre-installed accessories. Because essentially, if you're doing this prior to the deal ending and prior to the customer getting the unit, it is a pre-installed accessory because prior to the sale, you installed that particular accessory on the unit. So if you ever get lost and you forgot that you started that RO, just come down here and this will kind of be a telltale sign that if you've actually started the RO or not. Or you can go to the service tab and that'll show you any ROs open on this particular unit. Insurance tab is just if we have any insurance information that we're selling with this particular unit that we want to be included, we can go ahead and fill that information in. Taxes. All right, so I'm going to break this down real quick because a lot of people get lost on this part, and I just want to try and make as much sense as I possibly can here. You have 3 different taxing sections here. You have tiling rate 1, tiling rate 2, and local taxing authority. At any point in time, depending on how you set up your presets, these different titling rates in your local taxing authority can all have different tax percentages. So as a good example here, tiling rate 1 and 2 are the same, but if you look at local taxing authority, you'll notice by default, it's set up at a 7.5%. Now, why does any of this matter? I'll explain. If you're trying to get a good idea on what is being taxed in the deal, how you're taxing it, at what percentage it's being taxed, you will want to open up your tax breakdown. And this works the exact same way, and it literally looks the exact same in Infinity and in MA. No differences here. You'll have all of your products, everything that can be included as a front end, back end item, however you're wanting to break it down, all of it listed here. So anything from your fees, your aftermarket products, such as like your warranty, you get the gist here, allowance, credit, life, gap, insurance, so on and so forth. All of those items are detailed out on this list. If it is marked as taxable, you'll see the checkbox here, you will see the percentages generating. Now, where is it pulling this from? If you go over to the location section right here, it's going to tell you that the taxes for Adventure 3 or 35U, which is the unit here, is pulling from tiling rate 1 because that's how we have it set up. More often than not, almost everything in here will be pulling from tiling rate 1. Your extended warranties and stuff, however, typically pin from your local taxing authority. So that's where it's important to know that these will be getting taxed at a 7.5%, whereas everything else on this deal is actually being taxed at 6%. And the way you can always figure that out is because location will tell you which section up here it's actually pulling your tax percentage from. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. But after that, that essentially is just trying to help you give an overall viewpoint of your actual taxes being included on this particular deal. If you want a better breakdown of that, you can actually go into your commissions tab because it'll show you everything that's being marked as like a profit, your taxes, all of it, so on and so forth. All right, disclosure tab. Pretty much the same in both systems. This is just disclosing out the standard deal information that can be included in on your particular deals. Usually this is what would be referred to as the customer friendly screen because it's just showing them a very generic breakdown of their deal. That way, if they get lost somewhere like going through the deal with you and you're just trying to help give them a very easy viewpoint that doesn't also show them some of the cost sensitive information you don't want them to see, just show them the disclosure tab. That'll give them everything from like a standard customer that they would need to be able to understand at least what's going into their deal. Personnel. Same thing for both systems. It's essentially just going to list it out as what employee was brought over. So since I brought myself over as a finance manager, I would still be responsible for coming in here and adding a salesperson to this particular deal. So as you'll notice, you have a manager section, a team lead section, and a salesperson section. So for the salesperson, all I would have to do is hit this button down here. It'll give me a drop down that I can use. And then if I know my employee number, I can go through the list and pick my salesperson. In this case, I'm just going to pick a motility favorite named Chris Huffer. I can come over here and pick his employee type. Since he's defaulted in the system as a finance manager, that's what I was trying to pull, and I can still make him a salesperson directly. After I have him added on here, I can go ahead and hit save, and now he is the default salesperson on our deal. That way, when I go to fill out the commissions tab, I can go ahead and make sure he's appropriately getting his commissions. All right, sales profit. What is this? This is just showing me the actual profit on the unit itself, factoring out any of the other aftermarket stuff, such as gap, warranty, so on and so forth, right? Just showing me the true profit on the unit cost and the unit profit that I'm actually making off of it. And it's including the trade allowance into it as well to try and give me a more accurate gross profit number that I can actually review, as well as the sales history for the particular vehicle that I have listed here. So it'll show it by the actual months broken out, the days itself, and the average price range and that information. But since this unit hasn't been sold before, I'm not going to be able to see that information as it's normally would be displayed down here below. F profit. This actually has a little bit more to it than just seeing the back end profit. So in addition to being able to actually look at the finance reserve calculation, which you can also have defaulted by the finance source you have selected up here at the top. Let me go and pick one. So we'll pick First National Bank. So First National Bank had a reserve calculation in here different than 17. It would have updated and picked from the long list of different calculations, which once we get out of the deal screen itself, I'm going to actually show all of you how you can set these up by your banks by default. But as you can see here, it's a pretty extensive list. But this also gives me the option to apply cost to all of my aftermarket products. So as an example here, if I was to try and fill out my aftermarkets on my quote tab, you're going to notice, yes, I can pick a selling amount and I can pick out the terms and all that information, but there is not a cost field here for me to fill in. So if I want to be able to actually get a true gross profit on all of my aftermarket products, insurance products or warranty products, I have to fill in the cost here for those particular products. Otherwise, when we get to the end of the deal, I will not get a true gross profit and my numbers will be skewed. Reporting will be messed up and then you'll have a few problems on your hands. So just remember when you're doing this part, to always go to the F profit tab, ideally to really fill in the aftermarket products you're wanting to add into the particular deal. Commissions. So there's a few things to talk about here. First and foremost, I can fill in the commission rates for any manager, salesperson, team lead. It doesn't matter who I'm adding to the deal. As long as they're on the deal itself, it'll give them an option to actually fill in their commission information. So whether that's a flat rate versus a percentage or both, it will then generate a commissionable amount here. So let's say that I wanted to give Tyler 5% and then 200 flat. Let's click out of that line. you will notice it gives me my commissionable amount. Now you're probably wondering, why is this line red and why is this line yellow? I'll explain. If you look down here in the bottom left, it actually tells you. When you see the yellow one, it's just telling you that the employee's total commission is less than their defined maximum or minimum. Meaning that if I have a defined commission rate for Chris Huffer in this system that is above $0, it's tagging that, saying that, hey, he deserves more money. He's supposed to be getting at least this minimum. The reason you're seeing Tyler generate red is because I probably don't have a commission rate set up for him. So his defined maximum is 0 right now. So anything above 0 is going to turn red for him as well. The way this is controlled, most people don't know, is if you go down to the bottom, you have an edit defaults button. And what this actually does is if you guys have stagnant commission rates, meaning that you don't tier it out based off of however many units somebody sells or however many sales they have in a month or something of that regard, or let's say that you tier it out based off of the type of unit they do, then this grid wouldn't be useful for you. But if you use flat rates and like flat commission percentages that don't change based off of a tiering system, then you can use this grid and set up default percentages, flat rates for both front and back end, and then set in their minimum max for new, minimum and max for used. And then those lines will no longer change color unless you actually overgo the maximum or go beneath the minimum. So it's just something that you can do that if you don't, again, have changing commission rates and you want it to just stay in here moving forward, you can set up your grid for all of your employees that could potentially get a commission on a deal. We got a question?
Well, I may be behind on it, but Albert asked, how do you remove a finance source?
So when you say remove a finance source, Albert, do you mean like take one out of the system? As in like off that list specifically, so it's not showing and overloading the list, I'm assuming?
Take it off. He says no.
Oh, I mean, if you're just
talking about taking it just off the deal itself.
oh yeah, you can just change the deal type. I mean, that's as simple as that. That's usually the best way to go about it. So like if I wanted to go to a cash deal, that will get normally rid of anything that's finance, but normally there's also a blank one that you can select up here at the top. But I do have a ticket open on that specifically because there used to be a blank line in Infinity that you could select from. But normally that's all you would have to do is there'd be a blank line, select it, and that'll clear your finance source out for you. Once that ticket's finished, that will be updated and then you'll be able to do that moving forward. That's what I did to cash. It just eliminates the finance section out of it.
Yeah.
So from a paperwork standpoint, it won't conflict. But yeah.
And then also, can you go through this in MA as well?
Yeah.
We've got a few people I see in MA and like printing documents every time.
Yep. Let me go ahead and flip it over to that because we were getting to the end of this anyways in Infinity. So in service, this is the last thing I'm just going to show you. If this unit had a service RO open on it, which it does, you would just go to the service tab and then it would actually break this information down for you up here. So the document it's tied to, what the complaint is, the code, if it was listed, so on and so forth. It's just there to be helpful. And if you need to actually open the repair, you can view it right here and actually open that up or print it out from the screen too if you need to. All right, now we're going to transition this back over into MA and review it from that standpoint, which looks like my MA locked up on me. So let me go ahead and refresh my page. Perfect. Let's go into deal desking directly. All right. So NMA, this is going to be your home screen for deal desking real quick, just to give you a little quick preview. It'll have it, of course, just like Infinity, broken down by quote, open, done, and canceled. Difference is in Infinity, all of these viewing points are down here at the bottom instead of being up here at the top. And your quick links no longer underneath the edit modify, they're all over here on the left. So if I need to get to my invoices, my warranty company info, finance sources, so on and so forth, this is how I can access it in MA. But let me go ahead and open up our quote. All right. So again, this is just letting me know the unit I have tied to this particular quote is on hold. That's fine. Let's go ahead and hit edit down here in the bottom right-hand corner. This is just letting me know that since I do have this quote technically opened already, that's fine. I would need to come in here and unlock it. Going to take me straight into finance. I'm going to go ahead and unlock all of this just in case. It's better to be safe than sorry. And then go ahead and hit edit. Perfect. All right. So kind of walking you through the same thing. We already reviewed the quote tab, right? We reviewed what was on Infinity that was laid out across on the quote tab, but we're going to look at it in MA now. So instead of your deposits, print docs, all of that information being here as one big section in the quote screen, it actually has it laid out. Let me try this real quick because it's a little bit too close. There we go. I don't want to zoom out too much, but all right, perfect. So if I want to add a deposit here, let me go ahead and turn this into a deal. So that way I don't get that same pop-up. But if I want to add a deposit in the system, it's pretty simple. Just hit the button here. It'll give me my deposit line once it finishes loading, and then I can go ahead and fill out the information and cash it out or send it to cashier. If I want to edit my fees, I can hit other fees, go in here. And again, the same thing that I did in Infinity. If this is a wrong amount and I want to type in the appropriate amount, let's say that zeroed out because we're not actually selling electronic registration fee, I'll go ahead and do that, and it will unmark it as sold as well. Aftermarkets is the same concept. It's going to have all of your supplier information listed here to the left if you have it set up correctly with a description of what the products are. But you will also notice, yet again, there is no cost listed here. So yes, while I could go ahead and fill out that I'm selling these items right here, it would actually probably be better for me to do it all at once under the F Profit tab. Memo tab is the same thing. If I have any forms in here that pull directly from the memo tab or the buyer's order memo field, I could have that populate on the form as a message to the customer. So that way, when I get ready to print the information out, they have it. And then we won't get into the ESP because that's equity savings program. And that's something that really almost nobody uses that's on the software because it's hard to find trailers or RVs that actually can keep a positive equity over a long-term, period of time. The disclosure tab, same concept here. It just discloses out information, just a little bit neater than Infinity in regards to how it has it spaced out. And it's a little bit more readable. Personnel is going to work the same way as I go through this tab. Instead of it all being pulled up on one jumbo screen, it's all collapsed. So that way, if I need more space to view what I'm looking at. So for example, let's say it's not a salesperson I'm trying to add a manager. I can come in here, hit the add manager button. Go ahead and put them on there, delete out any extra ones I don't need. The buyers tab works the same way, except there is a few other things in here that Infinity does not have. So I'll talk about that real quick. The main item is going to be this and or line right here. So essentially what this is if you're in a state that requires and or for it to say and dash or on the paperwork that you're trying to do, you will have that option available in MA. And if you're trying to get it to say both and or, and that's not available in the dropdown, don't worry. A lot of these fields are manually typable too. So if it's something that's like, let's say like that right there, I could type that in manually, keep it in, or I could just go to my list and pick whatever I have listed here and fill it into that spot. But this is moreover in the event that you have a co-buyer and you're needing to be able to put, the appropriate lineage out on the on the actual paperwork for the co-buyer itself. Units. This is just, again, giving me an option to pick which units I do and do not want to have added to the deal. It's usually suggested that you use 1 unit per deal, but if you need to be able to have multiple on there to quote, you can. Just to understand that when it comes to the actual forms, the paperwork and stuff that you're going to print out, it's not going to display all of the units unless you have a multi-orders buyer form. And even in with that, that's only going to show a maximum of 3 total units broken out. It will not show anything more. It will show less, but it will not show more. I need to actually get straight into the unit inventory, which is a pretty nifty little shortcut in here under the units tab in MA. I can actually hit modify inventory, and this will jump me straight into the unit inventory module pretty quickly. That way, if I need to make any direct edits to the unit that maybe are not available on the units tab, I can do so. And as you saw, it loads up very quickly, and it's very easy to come in here and actually access and do any kind of adjustment work on. It's okay. It's just letting me know that the serial number I have for my unit isn't accurate. That's fine. Trades tab, same concept. If this customer has a trade, which he does, I can pick from the trades drop down, select what I'm wanting to select here, and it will load in my trade unit information. That way, since I already put it on the customer record, if at any point in time they have multiple units, I can switch back and forth between what unit they're trying to trade. Or in the rare event that they're actually trying to add a second one, I can go ahead and do both of them at the same time if I need to. Which technically I put the same unit in here twice, but that's fine. All right, insurance tab. Again, this is just if I need to fill out any insurance information that may be included with this particular unit. The agent name, the kind of actual insurance that they're putting in here. I can even search for the entity directly if I need to, versus just typing in basic information. It just helps tie all that info into the deal so you're not having to go back at a later point in time, like directly on the entity record or somewhere else in the system to try and find this information. Accessory tab works the same way. If I come into it, all I have to do is hit add for a line. I do have some things down here if I have it set up for the unit that will pull in suggested accessories or pre-generated accessories I have built in the system by unit. But if I don't have that, I can simply come over here to my drop-down list again and then pick which I need to pull out of this. And at the bottom, I can go ahead and hit start service arrow since I now actually have an accessory included. Yep. And it just wants to know, since I already have an open work order open for this, if I want to go ahead and tie it to that one, I do. That way we can just have one centralized work order and set up a whole bunch of different ones for the accessories that could be potentially added from this unit. And if I come down to the pre-installed section, you will actually see both the accessories that I have selected for the unit tied to the same work invoice, both viewable for the amount and the cost that I have added them into the system for. Right. Up here at the top, again, this is just the sales profit tab. This is just going to be showing me how it's broken down in MA. It's a little bit neater because it actually breaks it down by your total figures versus your dealer figures. And then again, if I had a sales history on this unit, I would be able to come down here below to review that sales history to see how often it has been sold in the past year and what month it may have applied to and the total amount of times. I have the F profit tab up here at the top. This is essentially going to show me, again, the back end profit that I would be making on this particular deal, as well as the finance flat rate that I may have set up and the finance reserve calculation that could be potentially set up for the bank that I have selected. If I need to be able to actually apply cost and the selling price for each of the different aftermarket products that we have, I just come over here to this section, fill in the premium price, the cost, and then it'll actually calculate my dealer percentage in profit. So to give you an example here, let's say that we're selling this for $2,500 and the cost on this particular piece is only $1,000. That's not what I said, but that's fine. So 100, and we're profiting $2,400 essentially, right? And if this was eligible or single, so on and so forth, I can actually list out the criteria of information here and then move down to the warranty products. If there's anything I need to set up for that, I can do the same. And then any additional products that you guys may sell as a dealership, you can also fill out doing the same thing. Missions tab, like I said, this is going to operate identically to Infinity because it's going to break it down the exact same way, while also giving you your actual retail difference, your total gross, so you can see what you'll be profiting on this. So the available actual gross profit that can be broken out through commissions, and then your actual total commissionable amount that you may have. So if I come up here from the front end perspective, and let's say I put in 10%, and then on the back end, let's say he's eligible for 2%. It's going to give me a combined commission total over here on the right from both front and back end. Instead of just giving you a commission amount on the front and a commission amount on the back, it'll go ahead and sum them both up over here for you on the right.
What does single mean? We might have on the last.
If they're talking about on the F profit. So it's, to my understanding, it's just a single contract. So like, let's say I come in here and I'm trying to purchase multiple accidental health for multiple units. I wouldn't mark single on here. I would leave that out.
Either single or joint.
Yeah, there you
These are
go.
Insurances, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't see it.
Yes.
So it's one or two.
Yeah.
The beneficiaries of the insurance.
Yep. Whereas warranty is just if you're eligible for it or not. And then down below it, eligible. And then quantity is determining how many of these additional products you're wanting to sell here. So that's what this quantity is. If I'm trying to put 2 in for the additional product line right here, whatever I put the amount in for 1, it will update it to 2 equivalent of selling. And then it'll give me my true profit for that. But yeah, so this is like single versus a joint when it comes to your insurance. Was there another question on there?
No.
Perfect. All right. Commission. Again, if I want to edit the defaults, same concept down here in MA. I can just come down here to edit defaults, and that'll pull up the exact same grid that you were seeing in Infinity. And then once I make any adjustments in here to anyone's default percentages that they may have, I can hit the save, and that will update whatever adjustments that I've made. And essentially how those percentages would load is if I set myself up with any, which we're about to check, I would hit the load defaults instead of filling in the numbers myself. And it would pull in whatever default percentages or flat rates I actually have set up in the system for myself, which since I'm set up with 0, it went ahead and defaulted everything I had filled out up here to a 0 amount instead. All right, history tab. All this is really displaying to me here is any changes that I may have made to this particular deal as I'm going through it, any of that information, so on and so forth. Just essentially is trying to help me actually review that information as it's being listed out. So if I changed a name, if I changed the finance source, if I changed the buyer, so on and so forth, it's just tracking what I've done to this particular deal. Like I said, the buyer order tab, both in MA and in Infinity, is pretty much the same concept here. It's just showing me a salesperson friendly view of the deal. So that way, if they are working it to a quote and then they're handing it off to the sales manager as a deal, they can't see any of the stuff that they don't need to be privy to. The moment they change it to a deal and give it to a manager, the manager will be able to see the quote tab and all that information. But if you have the salesperson restricted to the buyer's order tab, that's all they will ever see. Comparison tab works the same way in the system. If I need to be able to actually like compare the information that's tied to the deal. So if I need to change my selling price, if I need to change it from a finance deal to a cash deal, if I want to adjust my, cash on delivery or whatever amount I want to do over here, I can do that. It's just giving me the options to be able to kind of work my deals from different angles without losing the previous deal that I had set up in the system. And then taxes, same concept. It's going to break it down by tiling rate 1, 2, and local taxing authority. Give you your total tax amount on this side, whereas the tax breakdown chart, instead of being on the left, is actually going to be on the right. And it's already popped up for you at all times, so you don't have to worry about expanding it or, de-expanding it back down or collapsing it. You'll be able to come in here, and it's actually a little bit more readable than Infinity, because it's a little bit more clear with less clutter in the way. So it just kind of helps you be able to go down the list a little bit easier and read through it if you need to. And again, anything that's not marked as taxable isn't going to be taxed, which is why you're seeing everything in here with 0%, except for allowance, because allowance actually marked the tax. So it's pulling that tax percentage in there for you to be able to review. All right, service. This is going to take us into the actual ROs that are available for service.
Okay, my last page.
Yep.
I was going to say, because you show how to print.
Yeah. We're going to jump into that.
I didn't realize.
So again, this is just same thing as an Infinity as an MA. This is just trying to show you how you can actually get to your service ROs without having to jump out of deal desking, jump into parts and service, figure out the navigation for that. It's just a quick little shortcut if I need to be able to open up the RO directly and look into it. Or if I actually want to navigate through the system, I can just remember the document number and then go into parts and service and type that in and it'll pull it up as well. But, to each their own in that regard. All right, printing out forms in MA versus Infinity. Let's take a look at that. So down here at the bottom, you're going to have this print docs button. You're also going to have an upload and view docs. Please do not get these three confused. These two are for any forms that you've already printed out, you've gotten signed, and you want to keep a physical copy in the system. That way you can reprint it out at any point in time. That's what upload docs and view docs are meant for. Print docs, however, will take you to a completely different screen, which will actually show you any of your buyer order print lists that you have set up, as well as all available documents that could be potentially printed off for this particular deal. Now, let's go ahead and wait. It's going to pull it up. Perfect. Okay. So in Infinity, you saw all your print docs as lines from 1 through 20 that you could see, right? In MA, they put that shortcut over here. That way it's not eating up room on your actual deal screen. And how this would work is if I wanted to actually print out all of these forms, I would click right here. You'll notice it has created two text boxes up here talking about which forms I'm trying to print. And when I'm ready, just come down here to the bottom right-hand corner and hit the print button. This is going to give me the option to fill in any custom fields that are on the form. So if I need to type in who it's verified by, I would just type the name, which in this case, I've got cap locks on, so that looks horrible. I click on the other form just to make sure if there was anything I needed to fill out. So is this a credit application, retail installment, contract, so on and so forth. I'd pick whatever option I'm trying to go for. And then when I'm done, if I filled in both the forms the way I need it to be, I'll hit print all forms instead of print form, because if you hit print form, it's only going to print one of the two forms. If you hit print all forms, it'll go ahead and print anything that's on that list that we have selected up there at the top. All right, once this is done, it should either pull it up into a PDF reader, or if you have Adobe installed, it'll pull up in Adobe. And it'll allow you to go through and review your forms that you're trying to print. Now, I'm glad someone asked this question, because I'm going to show you guys this so it's recorded as well. By default, most people should be, if they're using MA, Google Chrome, right? So that also means one thing that you need to do as a precaution is sometimes Google Chrome will try and pop-up block your PDFs. In MA, what you're going to want to do in Chrome is up here underneath these three dots. You're going to want to go to the settings, which, give me 1 second. I'll scroll down to the bottom for it. You're going to want to go to autofill and passwords, privacy and security. Scroll down to the bottom where it says site settings. Keep it going until you find where it says pop-ups and redirects. And always make sure you've got your MA site listed right here, allowed to send pop-ups and use redirects. Because if you don't, you may think that the system's broken, but in reality, Google Chrome's just blocking you from being able to print out your documents. So just as a good reminder, try and do that anytime you can. It's pretty easy. All you got to do is copy the URL, go here to the ad, and then just paste it in there. Once you're done, it'll list it down how you see it right here, and then you'll be able to proceed forward in the process with printing out your forms. Now, as you'll also notice, you don't just have the print option here, you also have the download option. And that's where the view and upload docs kind of comes in handy, because if I want to be able to print out, have the customer sign, then re-upload back in any document that we've already printed out for the customer, I can go ahead and do that by simply going back into the deal after I've printed off my forms, re-uploaded them back, got them on my desktop, and click on the upload docs button. And then what that'll do is if I go over here to hit upload, I'd go to select files, and then whatever files and stuff that I would actually want to pull from my desktop, I could just select. It would list it here. I would mark done, and then it would go ahead and actually put that form on the actual deal itself. So like if you want the buyer's order or any kind of receipts or any kind of bill of sale, anything at all, you want to tie it back to the deal, this is a great way to do it. And then if in the future, if the customer lost that copy from their own end and they come into the dealership requesting for, another copy of it, all I would have to do is re-download it and then print it right back out of the system. So
it's a great best practice to, when the deal is done, to upload all the signed.
Yes.
I don't know if that, they probably didn't hear me, but I'll point that out.
But essentially what Sean was just saying, it's a really good best practice to go ahead after you get all the forms signed at the end of the deal to just go ahead and upload it back into the system. That way, again, at any point in time, you can then have it available on hand. So if someone ever tries to challenge you on, well, that's not what was written on the original contract or something of that sort, at least you have a copy of it at all times available to you.
Easier to search than a file cabinet.
Exactly. Much easier to search than a filing cabinet. All right. But that's essentially how you would go about printing forms out of MA. And then just to kind of give you a quick preview in Infinity again, all I would have to do to print a form out here is go to my print docs. And if I don't like what I have here on my list, I can go to the all documents list, which will then essentially pull up select documents that I can pick, broken out by the type of documents that they are. So here's my financial forms. Here's my government set documents, other and miscellaneous that could be anywhere from a credit app to anything else that you may particularly have that you like to use. And then your insurance and warranty documents. So if I wanted to just say, let's pick Medallion Bake contract right here, I double click. That's fine. That's not a real form. That's okay with me. Let's try and find a buyer's order here. Let's go with that one. It's down here below. I'm going to go ahead and hit print because this one doesn't have any custom fields as it's telling me up at the top. And if I don't want it to take a minute to print, I can always hold the control key. But I already hit the print button, so we're going to wait a second. But if you ever want to preview it before you try and print, and I'm not set up to a printer, which is why I'm running into this problem right here. But if I would have held the control key and hit preview, it would have actually pulled the document up to where I could actually look at it before actually trying to print it out to a printer that doesn't exist. That's lovely. Let's go ahead and just close that. Yep, that's fine. All right, so let's try this again. Give you a quick little preview of it at least. So if you'll notice, I'm holding the control key. That went from print to preview. I can click on that, and that should open up the document for me to review. Give it a second. And again, a lot of this slowness from the Infinity print side isn't because of Infinity. It's just simple because I don't have a printer set up for my computer. So trying to do this can kind of take some time because it's trying to figure out what I'm doing here. All right, well, this is what I get for not having a printer. So we'll jump by this. But essentially, that's all you have to do to actually print out a form if you need to. You can find it here or you can use your presets over here. Actually appropriately transition a deal, whether it's MA or an Infinity, is all going to be through one specific section in both platforms. All of this is driven based off the status you're setting your deal into. So let me explain this real quick. Whether it's Infinity or MA, you're going to click your drop-down list for your status, and it's going to show you external, internal, and then if it's set up for the delivery calendar. So let me explain this. The external status is what you guys are seeing when you're on your deal home screen to help determine where your deal is currently setting at. So is it ready for financing? Is it open deal? Is it approved or pending finance? Are we waiting for the contract to be signed? These are all things indicating that the deal is not completed. It's not canceled. It's still being worked. So the internal status for all of those are set to open. Now, if I scroll down a little bit, you're going to see two of these right here say done in the internal status line. That is essentially what status you're going to transition your deal to once all the paperwork is signed, everything is completed, the unit's been delivered to the customer, the deal is done. So posted out for funding or posted not paid, or most typically you'll see posted to accounting. These are done statuses the deal can be switched to take an open deal to a done deal. And that is the only way you're going to have the posted to accounting button generate when you're ready for that. So let me go ahead and mark this as done. That's letting me know that there's an RO open. That's fine. When I mark it as done, it's going to populate these options up here at the top. So it's just letting me know I'm marking the unit on this particular deal as sold. and it was set at ready for sale originally. If I had a trade that I was trying to include in, it would be marking it as ready for sale, or different options I may have available to me over here is, work needed, pending work, out for funding, whatever specifically it may be to help classify what status your trade is sitting in. You can put that in. And then the last one is just the entity record. It's updating it from unable to assess to usually you would want it to be marked as a sold lead, right? Sold. Once I'm done here, I would hit OK, and that will transition my deal into a closed deal. Now, anytime you close a deal or you put it into a done status, it's always going to try and print out a commission voucher. So in Infinity, as you can see, you get a whole bunch of different options as to how you want to print that commission voucher out. But if I were to show you in MA real quick, essentially that same process. Let me hit edit up here, go up to the top, go to my status line. We're going to mark this deal as done right here. It's fine. Just letting me know my finance source isn't selected. So let me go ahead and get that put down there real quick. Let's mark this back as a done deal. Give it just a second. That's fine. It's going to let me know, same concept, what my unit's being marked, if I have a trade, and what my entity record needs to be marked as. Okay. It'll update my deal screen. That's fine. MA is a little bit different. It doesn't really give you the option to pick your commission voucher, different types. It's just going to pull up the pre-generated commission voucher sheet and list it out right here for you. And to zoom that in, you're going to want to click on these plus and minus signs, and that'll actually show you the detailed information out from the deal. So how much commission is available on the front end versus how much commission is available on the back end, and what the total commission should be for that sales rep. And then you can always jump back into your deal tab. And then when you come back up here, you'll notice it's set to the done status. And down below, you'll have a button that says post to accounting. This button will only generate, again, once you put a deal into a done status. Ideally, before you hit this button, it's always a good best practice to have any finance manager or accounting manager go into the deal and review it prior to actually posting it over to accounting. That way they don't have to back the deal back out. Now, the way you can actually look at those transactions, if you need to be able to see them as they're tied to the deal, is up here at the top, you're going to have this calculator that's going to say in MA, accounting transactions. So since I didn't post anything across, nothing is showing here. If I'm in Infinity, the way you're going to want to see this, let's go ahead and close out of this report real quick. That off my screen. I would go up here. I believe it's underneath your viewing option, and you'll see accounting transactions, and it'll be tied to the deal. So if I need to review any accounting transactions for the deal in Infinity, this is how I could actually get to it.
Hey, Tyler, I have a quick question.
Sure. What you got?
So for the auto loading commission vouchers, can we turn that off? Because we don't actually use those. I don't know if other people do or not, but is that an option to turn off the auto pop-up?
I believe it is. Yes, ma'am.
That's fantastic.
It's probably going to be underneath the settings part, or it's underneath the reports. So I know report security levels, you could restrict that from like the salesperson view point of view. So that way, when they go to finish it up, it won't generate it. So that's one way you can go about it. But yeah, that's something that can be turned off. If you want to reach out to like your support rep, they should be able to help you out with that.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Which one is that? Restricting what?
The commission voucher. They don't want that to generate the moment a deal is marked done, essentially. Because a lot of times when you mark a deal as done, you will actually then go in and do the commissions. But in our system, it's set the moment it's marked as done. It doesn't matter if you have it filled out or not, it'll still print it. All right. So the next thing I want to get into, since we actually have some free time here, is I mentioned this earlier. A lot of people don't actually know where to go set up their finance reserve calculations. And it's actually pretty simple. So let me find where I have moved my mouse to, since I am operating. There we go. Let's do this in MA first. So I'm going to jump it in here. We're going to close out. So in the event that you ever need to be able to set up different default finance reserve calculations by your finance sources, the easiest way to do it is if you go to your finance sources over here under your quick links, you're going to see right here, and it's going to have, of course, your list. So if you need to go through this one at a time, you can. But you can just click this drop down and then apply whichever finance reserve calculation needs to actually go there. And you can do this again per finance source because we actually offer specific ones like US Bank finance sources, which I'll scroll down to give you an example of, and Bank of America.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just how to add a service tab. I think is what you're asking for.
So Justin, if you don't see the service tab, it's for one of three fundamental reasons. Number one, it's a restriction that's turned on that is preventing you from seeing it specifically. Number two, somebody has hid it from you. Or number three, by mistake, you accidentally hid it from yourself. So the way that you can get that back on there, and I'll come back to this little page real quick. Give me one moment. Let me just open this up. If you go to the pencil in your actual deal desking screen, right? And click on, well, you got to hit edit first. That's right. I always forget you got to do that. So you click on your pencil, hit manage tabs. It's going to give you the option here to turn on. So you see the display section. If it is not checked, it will not be displaying on your screen. So I have to make sure you check it. You also have the same capability like I did in the CRM. So if there's a way that you want to flow through a deal that's easier from your standpoint, you can also adjust the order of that deal in MA as well. This is not available in Infinity. You do not get the same options there, but you still can see all the same tabs. You just don't have the option to rearrange the order the way you want to see it in. All right, so you use it in Infinity. So more than likely, Justin, if it's not displaying here, in your case, just click over here and see if it's available on this dropdown. If it's not, it's a permission that's restricting you from seeing it. So that restriction would just have to be either turned off with like whether that's in the group you're assigned to or if it's directly assigned to your permissions. You would want to make sure that permission is turned off that's restricting you from seeing it and the permission that allows you to see it is turned on. So like the easiest way to explain
It
this.
says you check the permissions, but he's gonna look into it.
Okay. If you have any problem with that, Justin, just if we have a one-on-one or if there's any time that you have open you want to call in, just feel free to reach out to me and I can help you with that. I mean, it'll take me just a few minutes to find it. No problem. All right. But yeah, essentially, if you ever need to be able to actually adjust the finance information or anything like that, it's very simple to get to. It's just underneath your actual finance sources on the main deal desking screen when you need to. Now, Infinity, a little bit different. In order to get to them here, you just hit edit, modify, finance source. And then it'll pull up actually kind of a more neatly put together list here for you to be able to pick that information. And your default reserve calculation, like MA, is in the middle of the screen, and it'll be right here in a drop down that you can utilize. And then it's just a matter of actually filtering through them one at a time. Now, granted, y'all won't be like our test environment where we have 145 in here, but you know, if you've got like 20 or something like that, it's pretty easy to use the arrows to navigate through it. So that way you can actually go appropriately through each list. And then it's the same concept for if you're needing to be able to actually hit OK right here. Edit any of your insurance information, warranty information, all of that will be listed right here for you to be able to do the same. All the pages are almost identical. So like if I clicked warranty here, you'll see that it's, you know, same kind of layout, same kind of information. Just go through and put it in as you go. Anybody have any questions specifically about either deal desking tool, whether it's MA or Infinity?
Sarah asks, is there a checklist for this in the CRM entity if they already exist? If they exist in the CRM and not in the finance source, ask her for clarity on that because I'm not sure exactly what you were saying when she sent that. I think she's asking about like checking off an entity as a finance source.
So, Sarah, that question you asked previously in regarding to the finance source stuff, what specifically were you asking?
Oh, basically, so we had realized that if you already have an existing entity out there, to pull it into a warranty company, we realize you just check the box on the warranty company side in the CRM. So I was wondering if that was similar with Finance Source.
I believe Finance Source is a little different. You have to start it from this section.
I can answer the question.
Go ahead, Ron.
Okay.
Can you mute your mic?
Yep. I'm going to mute my mic and Ron's going to actually talk on that a little bit.
Hey, Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So there is a way that you can pull an entity as a finance source from the CRM. It is a little bit tricky, and it's not going to be similar to like a warranty company or a parts supplier. So what I would say is if you ever have any entities like that, it's best to just reach out to the support team and they'll kind of walk you through to do it. But it's not just going to be a checkbox from the entity in CRM, but it can be
Okay.
done.
All right. I think our workaround was we created it and then just merged the new entity into the old entity. That was, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, with Finance Source. So I was just
What was that
curious.
workaround again, Sarah?
Basically we created it as a Finance Source and then merged that entity into the original existing.
That also works as well. So actually a pretty good idea. But for those who are curious about what Sarah was just referring to when she was talking about like the warranty information at first, I'll show that to you real quick because I did kind of. So essentially, when you're in the CRM, whether it's MA, Infinity, either or, when you're on an entity record, underneath the AP info and the AR info tab, you're going to have different checkboxes that will apply to those particular entity records. So for example, if I'm inserting this entity record into the system as a floor plan company, and I want to make sure the system actually tracks it as a floor plan company, I have to make sure underneath the AP info tab that the floor plan company box is checked. Same concept for if it's a bank or if it's a parts supplier or just a standard supplier in general that I'm using. I would want to make sure one of these 4 boxes are checked if any of them are applicable. Now, AR info, however, is going to give you the option to go ahead and check the warranty company box, which is where that's located. So if you're ever setting up warranty companies in the system, this is where you're going to want to make sure that checkbox is marked. So that way it's being included on any kind of search, because when you run an advanced search, whether it's MA or an Infinity, again, you will have an option when you're running that advanced search to search specifically by suppliers, companies, banks, prospects, so on and so forth. So if those checkboxes aren't marked, they will not be included if you try and do an advanced search to this degree. And then NMA, just to kind of give you the same preview real quick, show you how straightforward and easy that is. I can just shortcut myself to an entity record, which I'm about to do. By going to the Buyers tab, I'm going to hit Modify Buyer. This is just so I can show you real quick without having to jump into the CRM directly. AP info, same concept. Click here. It's going to give you your checkboxes down here at the bottom for you. So floor plan, supplier, show parts of supplier, is bank, and then AR info. Again, your warranty checkbox will be listed over here for you. We will reconvene at 1:30. We're going to cover reporting, which moreover, it'll just be showing you some of the best practices. And one of the things I will do in regards to the MA side is I'm going to show you guys how to batch report. That way, if you guys ever want to know how to do that, you'll have the option to see it. But yep, for now, if you guys want to go ahead and take about an hour break, we'll reconvene at 1:30. I'll leave the lobby open. So if you want to feel free to stay in here, that's okay. And then we'll just do the same thing when we get back. We'll just get a show of hands to see who's back and who's ready to go. Otherwise, you guys enjoy your break, and I look forward to working with you here in a bit. Problem, all I would have to do from that point is right click it, and it's going to ask me to add it to a batch. So I'm going to tell it needs to go to test 2. This report has been added to test 2. Perfect. Then from that point, any other reports, as I fill out the parameters that I want to add to it, same concept, fill out the information, add it to the batch. And then when you're ready, you can come up to the batch. So go to view batch list. And over here, you're going to see where it actually is going to give me the option to schedule out my task. So when I schedule this, this is going to give me the option to set up the parameters for my batching. So first and foremost, it wants to know what time I want this to start. So let's say we pick a whole number here and we go to 2 o'clock. All right. I want it to start on, let's go ahead and do the 19th. If I wanted to create an end date, meaning that I only want this batch to run for like a month, I can. Or if I don't want an end date, I can leave that alone and then come down here to a reoccurring pattern. So if this needs to be a weekly report that I get for all these reports, I can set it up to weekly. If I want this to be monthly, I can select this. And then I can also create the repetition that if I want to send every so often in minutes, I can give that breakdown as well. And then once I'm done and everything's good, I can hit save, run, and OK, and that will go ahead and force the batch to run. Or if I just hit OK, it will allow the batch to run on the dates that I have set up there in my parameters. But that is essentially how you actually create batching in Infinity for any kind of batch reports that you want to put together. So like if accounting needs a set, finance needs a set, sales specifically needs just like a prospect set, you can put together those reports that you need to put together and then go ahead and batch them out on the schedule that you want them to go on up underneath. Does that make sense to everybody that is using Infinity? If you want to raise your hand, that'd be great. If not, I'll just proceed forward and continue on to the MA side of it. Perfect. Okay. I think we're good on that. So let's flip over to MA now. Okay. So MA is actually going to be very similar, but a little bit easier to how you create batches in Infinity. So let's go ahead and click on reporting. That's fine. We'll leave this page. All right, so as you'll notice, my favorites automatically open because I come into the testing site in MA quite often. So I went ahead and put together a list of different, finance, sales, and unit inventory reports that I could use to be able to track information off of. Now, creating the batch list in here is actually pretty simple. If you come up here, you're going to see this little schedule. And click on that, and then it's going to have your batches listed out here. In order to create a new test batch or just a standard batch that you want to use, you just click the plus sign. It's going to give you the same information that you would need to fill out. Pick your date that you want it to start on, as well as time. So let's say this is going to start tomorrow at roughly, we'll go ahead and set it for 10 a.m. Hit OK. Email recipients. So I can click on this list to pull up anybody that is currently existing in the system. So if I don't know everybody's email off the top of my head, don't fret. You can go down the list, or if you know exactly who you're trying to give it to, you can go ahead and just type it in here if you need to. But for now, I'll go ahead and do the same testing email that I used last time. Perfect. All right. Actions. I'm going to want this to be an email. Schedule is turned on. Reoccurrence, same concept. How often do I want this to reoccur? Let's say I want this to reoccur once every month. Repeat on the first day that I have selected. Hit save. Perfect. Got that in place. I don't want there to be an end date, but if I do want to set one up, I could always just go to the end of this and say that this is going to end on the 13th of August, save again, and then I can go and close out. Now, with testing 2, I could again, theoretically, go ahead and add my reports from this page if I want to. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that if you don't have your parameters set up ahead of time and then you go adding reports in here, they very well could have no parameters and you get no data. So I personally would rather add the report to the batch manually. So the way I'd go about it, let's close that out. Find the report that I like, Click on it. You'll notice that in MA, your parameters are not all across the screen. They're all going to be neatly tucked in over here to the right for you to fill in. And then when you come down to the bottom, you're going to see a button down here that says Report Scheduler. So when you click on that, it'll give you the option on which batch do I want to add this to. I'd pick testing 2. Do you want to add the current report and parameter values for testing 2? Yes, I do. And now it'll show me a complete list of any reports that I actually have added to this batch. And if I need to view it or delete it off of here, I have both those options to do so. Now, difference here between saving the default parameters is instead of having to right-click on the report tree and pick the report name to do that, you just go into it, scroll down at the bottom of your field parameters that you have an option for, and just hit Save Defaults. That will essentially save whatever criteria that you're putting into the report fields. And then if you ever want to reset that back to where it doesn't have those default values, you can always just hit Reset. And that will go ahead and adjust those parameters for you back to the just standard defaults of the information you need to fill in. In order to mark it as a favorite, this didn't change. You just pick whichever report you're wanting to look at, right click on it, and then just mark it as a favorite. And it'll throw it up here at the top for you. Now, that being said, you do have a few other things that you can do with some of these reports. So the export options, for example, up at the top. Let me actually pick a valid report real quick and run some information on it. And go ahead and hit submit. I may pull up no values, but that's okay. Give it a moment. Okay, I'll return to records. Cool. So this is a sales now support in MA. If I wanted to export this out to myself versus just, batching it and sending it in an email, I could come up here to this little option and it'll give me a list of different ways I can export this report out. So if I'm more of a PDF kind of guy, or if I want to put it into, Excel, or, for whatever reason you want to convert it to a CSV file or HTML, you also have that option. But primarily PDF and, XLS and XLSX is what's most commonly used. So you can pick those options and then it'll let you export it out. You can, of course, also then go ahead and print it out if you need to as well, which will give you, the standard print options, and it'll pull up in the print page for you to decide how many copies of it you want to make. But all in all, very straightforward when it comes to the actual breakdown of how to adjust your parameters, how to set up the batch, and then also how to be able to actually favorite your reports inside of both systems. Now, is there anything specific about the batching system in Infinity or in MA, or anything about the favorites or, typical reports that you're looking to run that you guys have any questions about that I can walk you through to show you just essentially how you can do it in both systems? Sam, I see your hand raised.
So can you do the same report multiple times with different parameters?
Yeah, that shouldn't stop you. You just got to go in there and add it to it for the current value that you're trying to put in there. Now, well, hold on. If you're saying, are you talking about multiple reports, meaning that you're throwing it in the same batch?
Yeah, so I want to run the profit and loss standard, but I want to do it 3 different ways in the same batch, or do I have to do separate batches?
I'm pretty sure you have to do separate batches, because when you go to add, if it's already existing on the batch itself, so like, let me give you an example. Let's say I go to this sales analysis report, which is what I had selected last time, right? And I come down here to the bottom, and let's say I just change unit status to something specific. I hit save defaults, and then I go to my report scheduler. It should, let's see here. Let's see if it'll either update or add it a second time. No, okay, no, they have updated that. You can go ahead and do it 2 separate ways now. Originally, like in Infinity, when you saw earlier when I added that deal recap, if that report was already tied to it, it didn't give me that option. It just made me select it to the next one.
So
But
I can't do that in Infinity, but I could, if I upgrade to MA, I could.
Essentially, yes. Otherwise, you just create a secondary batch for it. And I mean, that may take you another 30 seconds to a minute, but I could see the the easiness of having them all underneath one, so you know what you're looking at.
Perfect. Thanks.
No problem.
Sam's got his hand raised.
Anybody else have another question?
Yeah, it's Corey.
Hey, Corey, what you got?
I see in MA, the custom reports is grayed out, so that's coming eventually here.
Good question. So they are available, but right now it is currently in the process of being essentially ran through to make sure that from a user functionality standpoint, it's a little bit easier for you guys to use. Because as of right now, unless you're like an IT whiz, you're gonna struggle a little bit with how to build those reports.
Right.
Okay, because we have custom reports that we set up in Infinity for our sales team to use.
Yep.
And that's what's kind of holding us back from fully going to MA is having those reports be able to print in MA.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we're currently, we're currently adding more data points.
Okay.
to this custom reporting tool.
So from what I was just told, we're actually currently adding more data points to be used in the custom reporting for MA. And that's currently the kind of like not setback, but the time that's being put into that, the reason why it's not fully available in that respect. But once that's put in and the information will be a lot easier for you to use and a lot more functional, like how you currently use it in Infinity. Not saying they'll be the same by any stretch, but I'm just saying in Infinity, for those who've created custom reports, they're not really hard to create. They're actually pretty straightforward once you figure it out. But MA is still underneath that period where they're trying to, really refine the tool and make it open and available for all of you to use.
Question, can you email yourself a batch from Infinity?
Yeah, you can email batch yourself from Infinity. You can do the same thing in MA. So when you're going to select who it's going to, you just put your own email in there. That way you can set up however many batch reports you want to receive. Or if somebody else asks you to do it, you can do it for them as well. So you really have both options on that list.
Yeah, Tyler. Hey, I think it was for Corey that was asking, if you already have, if you wanted to run one of your custom reports in MA, right now it wouldn't be there. But if you have those custom reports set up on a batch to automatically email or download to you, that function would still take place even if you migrated to MA. Those reports, they're not available to pull from this screen here, but if they were set up to say, populate every week or email to you every 2 days or whatever, that action would still happen.
Okay.
So it just depends on whether or not, if you rely on pulling it on demand, you wouldn't be able to do that through MA currently.
Right. And then we just pull them on demand, but we also have a couple where we've used, the customized boxes, we've got some special numbers in.
Yep.
And I haven't seen a place at MA where I can pull those up yet on a report.
Gotcha.
Customize 5 or 6, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
All right. Now then, I won't jump into that. That'll be a little hole. But outside of that, is there any specific reports or any questions about the reporting in MA versus Infinity that you guys have questions about that you want to see? What you got, Sam?
I'm totally new to Motility, so you're gonna have to forgive. Is there a way to create custom reports or modify existing, or is that all
So
MA or Infinity?
Infinity or MA, which one do you want to see?
Infinity?
Infinity, yes. So when you go into it, I open this back up. So if you're trying to edit an existing report, let me go ahead and close my batch window so I can get that out of here. See here. I want to say more often than not, I believe in Infinity, you would actually have to go the custom route, truthfully. So when you go up here, actually, here, let me do this real quick. Get back to my custom page, custom report builder. Here we go. Okay. So truthfully, all you got to do to really be able to make a report here is you have to pick out right data criteria. So if I hit new here, all of these are like subset data tables. So like a good example would be right here. This is telling me this is pulling from finance, right? It's finance manager specific. So each of these different sections may have different sets of data that's available. Like I can tell you there is a significant difference between service invoice header and then service invoice lines because it's pulling from different sections of the service invoice. This is pulling from the header section. This is pulling from the actual lines. Sam, did you raise your hand again?
No.
Or okay, gotcha. Okay. So when you go into it, it's all about what you're really trying to achieve. So sometimes you may go into a report expecting it, like when you're picking your initial set of data, that it's going to like contain certain fields. It's very possible it may not. So we'll give it a second to load. Next thing it's going to do is it's going to have me make decisions on which fields I want to include. So let's say for this one, I'm doing finance manager. I want to see the amount financed. I want to see the customer's address just to have that on file. Let's say I want to see cashed out date, any kind of contact information. So if I wanted to include cell phone number, city, state, zip, so on and so forth, I can pick any of these fields from the actual table itself. I want to pick, let's see here, get another one, customer number, company name, so I know which company this is for. Let's do deal type, deal date, and we'll even go with deal status and ID, just for like an initial example here. All right, now I'll close out of my field chooser. I can maximize this page to kind of get a better view of what I need to see. If this column needs to be moved over, I can move the columns around to best benefit however I'm wanting this to be lined up. Perfect. Now I have my body here. The next step would be if I'm wanting to be able to add filters. So, for example, the filters is going to be how I'm going to actually filter down my parameters for my report, right? So to not go too deeply into this, I have a selection here based off the data fields that were optional on the list that I was selecting from. So if I wanted to do it based off of, let's say, yeah, deal status would be a perfect one. I just typed that in too, I'm pretty sure. There we go. Yeah. So deal external status, perfect. Operator, it's equal to or less than or equal to. Really, you have different options here. It's based off if you're trying to run like a date range or if you're just trying to make something equivalent. So in this case, we'll say equal to. And then whatever the value field for that is. So normally when you're going through your list, in regards to deal statuses, it's not normally the deal status name. It's usually the actual value of the deal status. So for example, let's say pending new deal or something like that is status number 1. The value I'd want to put there is 1. After that, if I want to add more parameters, I would then have to decide, kind of similar to what we were looking at letter writing, and or. So if I need multiple fields to be congruent with one another, I would want to pick and. If I'm trying to add in something else that it's either this or that, I'm going to want to pick or. That's what this is essentially telling me. Or I can close it off through parentheses, which would essentially make it its own independent field that isn't dependent on and or. Add a new line. I could just essentially go in, pick the next filter I want to be able to apply. And when I'm done doing all of this, which in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that line off just for an example. Yep, get rid of that. I'll hit OK. Give it a moment to apply that parameter. And now nothing's going to show because I probably picked a non-existent value, which is okay. And then I just come down to the bottom and hit Save Report. And then it'll give me an option here to name the report, whatever I want to call it. And then those who are familiar with security permissions, you have security levels that you can set on reports by default are usually assigned out to your, your groups of groups of employees by whatever their group is. So for example, salespeople will usually have like level 1, level 2 access, but anything above level 1 or 2, they can't see. Where finance managers and sales managers may have access from 1 to 6, and then a GM's the only one that can get from 1 to 10. So it's really dependent on how you do your security levels. But if this is like a low end report that you're not afraid of impacting anything, you can just hit OK on security level 1. And then after that, all I'd have to do to find my report is go to my custom report list. I can filter it by the name if I need to, which I probably am going to have to leave the reporting module and come back for it to accept my new report. So let's go and close out of here. Let's go back into reporting. go back down to my custom report builder section. Oh, it was already at the top. Yeah, there it is right there. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'll just select my report, hit OK. Fill in the value I want to, hit OK, and then that would run the report for me. Since I was building this kind of fast, like I said, it's not going to pull anything because I picked a faulty value here. But once you get used to going through the steps and the flows and you know what you need to add or take out, move, do whatever you need to do, it becomes a very simple process in Infinity to actually create a custom report. And like I said, since I didn't have valid criteria, it's not going to find anything for me. But had I built like a legitimate, full-blown, customized report where I put in multiple filters, multiple things to try and flip file through, it will run pretty easily. And then once you're done, you can also export any of these reports to Excel too. So if you're wanting to run it that way, where you can get it into an Excel spreadsheet, just click on Export to Excel when you have a report marked, fill in the parameters as you saw me do, and then it'll export it to an Excel document that you can then review that report in if you don't want to pull it up directly in the system. That answer your question, Sam?
Yeah, I will mess around with that. I was looking to kind of rebuild some accounting reports, so I'll play with that, see what I come up with.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions in regards to how to edit a report, create a custom, go through the batching system, or how to mark something as favorite and then save the parameters? Any questions regarding that? Last thing I'll share real quick is this favorites list that I've compiled over here. So, I mean, it's kind of the same in MA and Infinity, but the difference here is, like I said, when you're in Infinity, you have so many of the sub options for your reports that it really turns it into like 8 or 9 different reports. But by what I've experienced through training and what I've walked through with other people, the report list that I like to kind of compile together from a sales perspective, more for like a sales manager and whoever manages the inventory, it's going to be this specific list you see up here in the top left-hand corner under my favorites. The new lead report is really good for identifying any new leads that come into the system. CRM utilization is actually keying you in on what people are doing in the CRM. So that way you can understand better if they're actually utilizing it and if they're not. Sales analysis is like my bread and butter for the finance department because it literally gives you an entire analysis of the different sales based off the date ranges and presets that you put in there, try and run it off of. Deal recap's exactly what it sounds. It's just going to be a page-by-page report that gives you a complete recap of each individual deal that you've run the parameters through. Finance company analysis is going to be a report that specifically you can run on any of your finance companies, and it will break down the number of quotes, deals, and successfully closed deals that you have for those companies. That way you know exactly how much money is owed to those banks if you ever need to be able to review that. Unit inventory hot sheet is just, again, it's a hot sheet just to pull up any unit inventory information. And if you're trying to get like an overall breakdown view of your unit inventory, the unit inventory accounting manager report is the one that I personally like to use for that. And then last but not least, for those who need to be able to see the profit versus the loss when it comes to the end of your deal, you can just pull the profit and loss standard report in the system. But these are like my main ones that I thoroughly like to use, give to people. That way it can help give them a lot of the prevalent information they're looking for. Those of you using MA. If you haven't seen this before, just like a little quick note for you. Up here at the top, this little man icon is actually a multifunctional thing that you can use simply for the fact that when we're using it, let me hop out of the reporting page screen. Let's go into CRM just for an example real quick. All right, so this has multiple functions. So if you're in MA, this is something that you're trying to utilize or you're intending on trying to move over to MA, there's a few little things that this little button up here gives you. For one, if you're a manager, which is whom we normally, like the main POC for the dealership, if you're trying to submit a ticket, this is the quickest way to do it because it's the submit ticket line. It will send it straight over to support and make it a lot easier for you. Down beneath it is a quick shortcut to get to settings. So if I don't want to click on the home screen, wait for that to load, and then click on the settings link there, I can just go straight up to this icon and click it here. Do not disturb is for those who are using lead rotations and you don't want like your lead assignment rules to assign leads to people while they're out on vacation. It's actually pretty simple to use. You just simply click do not disturb. It will have your employee information up here, why you're putting them in the do not disturb, and then you click the do not disturb button. When they're back from their vacation, sick leave, or whatever specifically they were missing those days for, you just click on the do not disturb line up here again. And instead of clicking do not disturb, you'll click available, and that'll bring them back into the lead rotation list without you having to manually go in every single time and remove them from that list. You can just click the do not disturb option or have them do it because it's user specific, right? Another little nifty feature you have up here is if you do not like this background, if white is too bright for you to look at on a daily basis, we do offer you a few other themes that you can utilize. So the gray theme, for example, is kind of a healthy mixture between the dark theme and the light. Just gives you this gray background with the white lettering. And then if you like the dark theme, if it's a lot easier on your eyes, you can flip to this option and it'll actually bring it into a completely dark background with white font text if you need to see it. Now, if this is too small for you, since it's a browser, you could always just hit the control key and use your scroll wheel on your mouse and that'll zoom in and out. But if it's just more of you're trying to get like a bigger font to read, you can actually adjust the font size through this little bar right here up to 2 total sizes. Or if you have, supervision and clearly you can read extremely insanely small text, you can reduce the size by 2 if you need to. So it's truthfully up to you in that regard. But yeah, that's just a little nifty feature that they added up there for MA users specifically. If you ever want to be able to switch back and forth between different themes, or if it's zoomed out too much, you just want to kind of zoom in a little bit, that's essentially how you can go about that. And then last but not least, if for those in Infinity, you already know how you can get to the help desk link and whatnot. But for those in MA, one way you can do it if you don't have it like saved up here as a default line like I do, you can click on this little blue question mark box. And this is actually, let me move this down a little bit so it can pop up on the screen better. But this will open up a little shortcut to the knowledge base. And you can even expand it out to where it's bigger if you need it to take up more of your screen. So if I'm looking for something CRM specific, and let's say it's not like a video or an article that I want to see, I could actually search the articles. I'd stop double hitting buttons here. And based off of whatever I typed in here, it'll tell me I have 3 engagements I could watch. And then I also have articles that I could just simply open. So if I wanted to see how to add CRM categories, how to adjust temperatures, or something of that specific nature, I now have a complete walkthrough right in front of me while I'm in the system that will essentially tell me what I need to be doing in order for this information to be input to the system and, ready and available. So if you guys are ever stuck on something and you can't get a hold of support, you can't get a hold of your CSM, there's nobody responding to your emails because it's a busy day or something like that, you can always just click on that little question mark bubble and that will give you an easy access into the knowledge base. We also have videos that are available on YouTube for you guys to watch, totally free. You don't have to subscribe to anything. You can just type in Motility software on YouTube and it'll pull it all up with all the updated videos we have. Or if you're communicating with your CSM, they'll also be able to provide you, or if the trainers were on site recently, we should have provided you with help links that will jump you straight into the knowledge base that essentially looks like this. Go ahead and open this up on a new tab for you. So whether you're in Infinity or an MA, it doesn't matter. The knowledge base covers both sides. So whichever one you're wanting to take a look at, you can literally click on that section and it will give you articles broken out by each specific module that you can utilize at any point in time to help yourself when you're stuck. So again, if it was like in deal desking, how do I add an accessory to a deal? I just click on this line and from start to finish, it's going to walk me step by step in the Infinity module on how to do this. Now, let's say I clicked Infinity by mistake, no worries. I can literally just click right back over here, go to Motility Anywhere, and then go down the same list. So it's really just up to you when you're using this on how much information you do want to learn about, because this whole base is consistently being updated and brought up with any new features that we're adding into the system with walkthroughs being added as well. So definitely try and bookmark this if you can, because it's, saved my bacon a time or two when I've been completely stuck or lost on a specific event happening in the system. So